All right, I would like to call this meeting to order. It is Monday, April 8th, 2019. This is a special board meeting for Superintendent Search, Round 2 interviews. Reverend Matias, can we take the roll call?
Mr. Ross.
Present.
Ms. Shotke.
Present.
Ms. Williams.
Present.
Dr. Baker.
Here.
Ms. Davis.
Here.
Dr. Flores.
Present.
Ms. Lewis.
Present.
Reverend Matias present. President Grant.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Support.
Reverend Matias?
Mr. Ross.
Yes.
Ms. Shotke.
Yes.
Ms. Williams.
Yes.
Dr. Baker.
Yes.
Ms. Davis.
Yes.
Dr. Flores.
Yes.
Ms. Lewis.
Yes.
Reverend Matias, yes. President Grant.
Yes. Next, do we have public comment for agenda or non-agenda items?
I don't have any.
No public comment? All right. Now for our special order of business. We will begin. First, I would like to welcome our community members. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. The single greatest, most important role of the Board of Education and ultimately our community is around the hiring of our superintendent. GRPS has come a long way since the last decision was made to appoint our superintendent in 2012. Graduation rates are up, test scores are up, chronic absenteeism is down, parental engagement is up, and enrollment has stabilized. GRPS is gaining state and national attention as an urban turnaround success story. But make no mistake, we have a lot of work to do, and there is still a heavy lift ahead to build off the solid foundation that has been established. That is why it is imperative that we as a board and community follow the process, engage the stakeholders, and take the time to make an informed decision. We greatly appreciate all the students, staff, and community members that joined us today for participating in this process and giving us honest feedback. As far as this evening goes, we all know that we have people joining us through our YouTube stream. You can still use the email address to contact us. John, what is our email address? Superintendentsearch@grps.org. Feel free to share comments or questions with us through that email address if you are not able to be here this evening. We will also have comment cards for the community members who are here joining us tonight. At the end of each interview portion, we will go through those cards and choose questions that have not been already addressed to share with our candidates. All right. Now we have with us Dr. Horton. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, President Grant, school board members, and Grand Rapids community. My name is Dr. Devon Horton, and today I'm going to share with you some of the systems and structures that I've built to help lead the work in former districts that I've worked in, and how I would like to apply it to continue the great work that's happening here in Grand Rapids Public Schools. All right. Here are some terms that best describe my leadership style, core leadership values that I operate from: collaboration, transformation, and positively disruptive. As you can see, some quotes that I put in here around what that actually means. I want to share that with you. You don't have it in the front.
We're just not seeing it in our monitors, that's all.
We have it here, though. We have a printed copy, though.
Okay. All right. These are just some of the terms that have been used to describe my work, and I take these very seriously. Working in East St. Louis for 4 years, I worked under a 20-year veteran superintendent, Arthur Culver, who's been seasoned and successful. And at one point, he gave me the keys to lead the district as deputy superintendent. And here are some quotes that he put in a newspaper when our district was recognized for a department that I designed, Office of School Turnaround, and we got recognized by the state of Illinois for some work. So I just want to kind of share with you some of the quotes that he made regarding the work that I led in East St. Louis. So, momentum towards excellence, leading Grand Rapids Public School transformation plan. There's been an amazing foundation laid for Grand Rapids Public Schools, and I will not cover all of these entities. I'm just going to talk about a couple. One of the first is that working in Jefferson County Public Schools, there was a racial equity policy that was built and voted on in May of 2018. Right when I joined the team, I was responsible for making sure that this policy lived. And many of the tenets in the racial equity policy were geared around, we have to make sure that we are making better decisions around disproportionality of students being represented in special education for our minority students, underrepresentation of our students in gifted and talented, making sure that we pay attention to our hiring practices for diversifying our teaching pipeline as well as our administrators, and also looking at just how we're reviewing any policy, any protocol that we design, being sure that we are conscious of certain non-intentional interactions that would happen from decisions that we're making. And we use a few structures with that. One of the things that you guys do here, you promote and market the Grand Rapids Public Schools success. I wanted to highlight in Chicago as well as in East St. Louis, definitely in East St. Louis, I was able to bring in Sports Illustrated, and they followed our football season for an entire year. And it was actually picked up by LeBron James, and he executive produced a docuseries that was called 89 Blocks. They followed us from the beginning to the end, where we won a state championship. And it didn't just talk about football, but it talked about just the day-to-day interactions of students in school, as well as their social life. It went into the community. It was a great success. It was actually nominated for Sports Emmy. And I actually had a little small cameo in there. You'll see why I didn't go into acting. I wasn't too great in that, but it was the real deal. Intriguing academic preparation. Two things I want to look at. There's been a lot of conversations around our theme schools. Currently, I am in the process we're leading a community advisory committee for the review of our school choice plan. That conversation was evident throughout the report that I received and read, but it also it was resonated today throughout all the focus groups. How are we going to offer these same services for all students? And I am leading that work currently in Jefferson County, not by myself, but as a team. As we look at, we had surveys go out to the entire community. We've had data to come back from those surveys. We went through a compression process in which we were working to identify what should be the guiding principles of our school choice. This is exactly where Grand Rapids Public School is right now. We have to make some decisions on how we're going to provide certain services and opportunities for students, but that's not something that you do on your own. That's where you build a committee, and we have these tough conversations with parents, community members, staff, and in some cases bringing in students. What you're looking at is this graph for the backpack of success skills. I would love to go deeper, but I only have 15 minutes, and I know I can talk a lot, so I'm going to trim this down. The backpack of success skills and initiative in JCPS, where we are going beyond just students learning reading, math, and science, and we're looking at what are students learning beyond just that core, and we looked at core areas of culture, globally and competent citizen. We also looked at students who want to be resilient in their learning, learn how to be effective collaborators, communicate better. Those are the elements, and so what you're looking at here is how many, just in our first year of implementation, my team, we were responsible for implementing this process through Google EDU. These are the number of artifacts that was uploaded at the elementary level, middle, and high just within the first semester. And they were tagged for, these are actually the documents. So we have 100,000 students. We had over 90,000 to upload artifacts in their first semester to basically describe and to highlight their learning. And this is under academic and training preparation. Relevant, rigorous course of study. Career pathways with local businesses. You guys are doing a great job with starting that process out at Ottawa Hills. We want to offer that in multiple areas with the hospitality program that's being offered. We have over 100 pathways in Jefferson County, and just last year was only 35. Other businesses have joined in, and we're able to do that work. But I want to talk about heavily the essential systems for strong learning climate. This is data from from Jefferson County from our fall to winter map data that we just took this past fall, from fall to winter. And what are those 5 essential pieces? I'll go back. Those essential pieces of a strong learning climate, it's actually 6 of them. You must, number A, must be focused on standards, understanding and be able to analyze. Teachers have to guide their lesson plans, their planning around living in standards. Strong data culture, strong instructional framework around math, English, science, and social studies. What exactly, music, art, what does good teaching look like in those particular subjects? Number 4 is progress monitoring. Monitoring as students are moving forward. Before we go into, we need to place a student in special education, we should be progress monitoring. System 5 is guided in academic and behavior interventions. And finally, the last one is that we want teachers to get support from administrators by going into classrooms, leading PLCs. There's an entire system that we build. So every school here, and if I was able to lead Grand Rapids Public School, we would have this system laid out as part of our instructional framework for every single campus. And we were able to do this in Louisville, and I lead this work currently with my department. And it was built and designed when I came onto the district. That's what are some of the results you get? You get some of we had the highest growth of any district in the nation from fall to winter on our MAP assessment. And I just want to share some of the success. And everything that we do, we look at it holistically, but we also look at it from a racial equity lens. And where every piece of data that we have, we look at it this way. And I would love to hear in Grand Rapids to do the same thing. How are our students performing across the board? Attract and retain high quality staff. So I've talked a lot about building a teacher residency. Last time, I believe I had a lot of conversation around that with you guys as well as today in the focus groups. The teacher residency does so many things for us. It helps us to fill our teacher gaps that we have, increase the number of African American, Hispanic, male teachers that we haven't, we're lacking in our teaching pipeline. And then the other side, from the professional development that focus on equity and implicit bias. We have to work on the mindsets of the adults, and starting with myself, we're doing a district-wide implicit bias training for all staff. We've done book studies. We've also done I wouldn't say community, but we've done mobile racial equity trainings at different schools every month, and teachers can go on their own and volunteer to be a part of that. And here's one of the other elements for our racial equity work that we've done. Every single staff member, certified and non-certified, will be required to go through an equity institute where we bring in professionals to come in and talk about the importance and to give some insight on how you could do better, how we can do better as a district around racial equity. Commitment to accountability. We have the racial equity analysis protocol where we look at every single thing, every policy, every protocol that we put in, we take it through the process. We actually do it at cabinet level now. It has been a really powerful process. I would love to make sure that we're looking at all of our decisions through that same lens. But something I feel like I've said this 75 times, but I want to go into this post-secondary push plan again. Going into East St. Louis, we had students who were, if you look at 2014, there was only $389,000 in scholarship earnings, and only 39% of those students were accepted into 2-year, 4-year military college or trade, and we had an 8% dropout rate. I built designed it in Phillips, and I enhanced it when I went into East St. Louis. What I designed was a structure where I'll start with the senior year. Senior year, every student required to apply to 5 colleges, military, college, or trade. They must also do 2 community activities, community service activities. They must complete their FAFSA, and if you apply to 1 college, you have to apply to at least 3. You have to do applications for at least 3 scholarships. But you just can't expect students to do that on their own. What we decided to do, I created a structure where we took the highest ACTs and the highest GPAs, put them in a cohort, and had a counselor to work with that population. Then we did 3 other cohorts. In the lowest cohort, ACT scores 14 and under, and GPAs under 2.0. And we found colleges and career opportunities and even military opportunities that benefited students that way, and we helped them to complete these applications. And as you can see, prior to me coming in, you see that data, and I don't think I need to say much about what has happened once we set high expectation, which is a part of being culturally responsive and culturally relevant, setting high expectations for all students, for the adults, the whole 9, and we were able to get a ton of students into college And our attainment rate also went from around 40% before I came to 59% of students returning to college for their second year. And I'm really proud of that work. Learning environments that promote student self-regulation. We are in some trying times. Teaching is just not teaching anymore. We have to equip our students, our teachers, and administrators with trainings and resources so that they can be highly effective. So you're looking at here, there's PBIS training. You guys have that in the district. There's trauma-informed training that I would love to bring in all of our schools, getting all of our teachers equipped in partnership with the union, which is what we were able to do in East St. Louis, and I would love to do it here. And then the OLA was bullying prevention practices, which is a system where every single school will be responsible for having a bully prevention committee. And then this committee will train staff around identifying students who have been bullied, students who are bullying, and potential suicide implications. And so with the work here that we've done in JCPS, as you can see, because we are investing in our teachers and training, you will notice that we've had a major decrease in incidents over just first semester. 1,800 less suspensions than what we've had in the past, and 16% overall in decline. I just want to go back. If I can get this still. Okay, got it. So I have a student that's sitting in this audience right now. I got in last night, and I end up going, calling up my student. He's a junior at Grand Valley State. And we met up. I went and got him, went to dinner, and he was a benefactor. I had Darrell, he's sitting in the audience. He was a third grader when I had him in my second school. Then his family trusted the work, sent all of his siblings to Phillips when I was in high school. And now Darrell, he benefited from the structure. So, and it's exciting to see, that he's got his plan, and I can't convince him to go into teaching, Darrell, but it's okay. Sound fiscal stewardship. The most important piece is that we spend a lot of dollars. There's some great bonds that's been approved. Sustainable funding to provide better opportunities for students and families. How do we do that? Great meetings today with the foundation. I have never been in a situation where there are foundations that's ready and willing to just jump in and support the work of the district. That is I know you guys don't take that for granted, and I don't either. So I have a lot of ideas. If you talk to them, I told them about a ton of them, of things that we could do to really enhance opportunity for our students. And then the program evaluation. Every curriculum, every consultant, every contract that we have needs to be placed on a 3 to 5 year evaluation program. And it can't be the individuals that brought it in. It has to be a team of individuals who are neutral to the work. And these evaluations either end up in A, we're doing it really well, we leave it alone. B, we're not doing it well, but we need to make some changes in how we're implementing. Or C, it's not effective. And that's a structure that I was able to lead and build in East St. Louis for our program evaluation. And I just put this quote in from a gentleman who's from actually Grand Rapids. I wanted to just share that. Here's another quote I have from another gentleman, probably one of the most popular gentlemen. I didn't realize he was from here until maybe about a month ago. Conducting collaborative calibration visits. One, if you talk to many people, I'm a systems guy. So going into Jefferson County Public Schools, it was important. We had these 3 big pillars: the racial equity, I spoke about that last time, the backpack of success skills, the culture and climate. But all of that, it doesn't move if there's not a systemic way in how you're measuring and evaluating and providing support. So the CCVs were built by myself, and then I had the team to lead to go into these schools starting in September, where they gave feedback. Every single campus, all 155 of them, were visited in September by a team of about 5 to 7 individuals, and they gave feedback in each area. So they gave powerful practice, opportunities for growth, and then required or recommended changes to what was happening in the respective schools. That is important that we do that. And then we support it, going into the campuses regularly, giving weekly reflections. That was part of the responsibility. I had to do that in order to make sure that we're connected to the work. And we gave feedback to their weekly reflections. And then we have what we call reality checks, which I have on here, and I can go in a little deeper. But those CCVs, they then had again another set in January to check for progress. And then they got a report around the same tenets. And then, of course, upgrade and develop a more comprehensive district-wide data dashboard. When I was in East St. Louis, I went in and we didn't have a dashboard. I was going to leave it at that. And so I reached out to a BI company via email, and they responded, and it's called Domo. And they reached out and said, well, we're a business. I said, well, let me check out your product. So when they shared the product with us, I was excited because I was able to use it in whatever entity. We were able to put the app, it's an app. We were able to put the data in the hands of our board members, put the data in the hands of our teachers, in the hands of our administrators, the whole nine. Of course, it was controlled what we put in your hands, so you can just see everything, including myself. But we were able to do that, and I just wanted to share this. This is a video from some of the success we've had in East St. Louis when we used Domo. Please enjoy. The actual town of East St. Louis has now held the title for the murder capital of the United States for quite some time.
I think of the word resilient with the whole community. We just have a resilient spirit.
The people of the city are friendly and they're inviting, very welcoming.
Before, we would look at data on the surface level. It was just like you're chasing your tail, still not making the impact that you're making.
We're trying to find the story behind the face of all the issues. For example, if you have a student who's not doing well in class, are they coming to school regularly? Are they behavior issues? And we've been able to unravel quite a bit of that.
I'm a mother of 5. I'm a grandmother of 8. Right now, I have 489 additional children of my own that I am responsible for.
What Domo allows us to do, it puts the data in our hands. We're allowed to design, it's like for us, by us, for the needs of the underlining of the work. So you can look at these assessment baseline data for Park, for example. But we know there are other entities that impact that data that's beneath that, and Domo allows us to do it. So it's given us resources and the power to make change.
By using the information within Domo, we were able to reduce our suspension rate from 32% down to 17%.
Loud and proud. For me, it was just having a clear, concise format that allows us to make data-driven decisions.
We were able to improve our attainment with our assessments from 4% to 18%.
So in the end, when a student graduates and walks across our stage, I think we fail if we don't have a viable plan that's official for students to move on. Decisions are being grounded in facts, concrete data. You can no longer say, well, you don't know what you don't know. That's not allowed in 189. You have to know it. And, one of the key pieces of having us to know what's going on is through our use of Domo.
Every day is a new day for me. I appreciate it, having the opportunity to be in my community that I love, coming back from the schools that I attended, and to be able to support the students in our community.
If we don't educate our children, then where will our country go without it?
The community of East St. Louis will only improve if the quality of the students that we're sending through our system are there. That has to be improved in order for the city to change. So I just wanted to share that with you guys, just to share how the data, just to share with you how important data is, and that how I lead as a leader is grounded in data. And in closing, I just want to share, this is from a tweet from an assistant principal at one of our assistant principals meetings. We have these every week, every month, and they're a professional development, really strong focus on building capacity. And so this is something that, when I was presenting, that she tweeted about, and we're continuing to do good work in Jefferson County. But I would love for Grand Rapids to be my choice. I am excited about what you guys have done, and I really believe that I'm a good fit and a good match for the work here in Grand Rapids. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Gonna give you a second to breathe and set up. And
I've been tested today.
Well, so now we are going to go to our interview portion. It'll be formatted just like the previous interview where we'll do round robin format and each individual will ask questions. This time we'll also be doing some follow-up questions. So if there is some additional information that myself or my colleagues would like to know, then we'll follow up with additional questions.
Okay.
And we will start with Dr. Flores.
Thank you. Dr. Horton, what is your role in improving teacher morale? Please provide specific examples of how you contribute to or facilitate staff and support morale.
Yes. So I think my role, and I'll start with East St. Louis, one of my responsibilities is to make sure that teachers are properly equipped with the tools and the resources in order to do their job. And what does that look like? It's not just giving books and pens and technology. It's about providing the right training, providing the right support from coaches and administration. So that's one way. The other side is part of that grant I mentioned, the U.S. Department of Ed, we actually had a portion in that grant where we gave incentives for teachers. And the incentives, and I'll back up. In one of our school improvement grants, we also created an incentive portion for our teachers at one of our elementary schools when they performed at a certain level on MAP and on NWA growth. They were able to receive additional dollars. They were excited about that. And when we wrote the second grant from the U.S. Department of Ed, we also wrote a grant. Inside that grant, we incentivized giving our teachers celebrating and also our support staff and building principals. They all received additional dollars for if they met certain benchmarks on growth or performance. The other piece is, as we're having the voice of teachers heard when we meet monthly with the union in East St. Louis and every other week in Jefferson County, we have a real conversation. So as they're articulating concerns or things that they want to do differently, we document and then we go back and when there's opportunities to implement or to address a lot of the concerns or the issues that they're facing, we actually address them head on with our administration and support administration to help build their culture. I can honestly say it's simple, but we recognize in East St. Louis, one thing we did that wasn't happening. At the beginning of the school year, we gave out awards and recognition for teachers who were doing great things, not just grounded in, and also support staff, not just grounded in performance on assessments, but they get awards from their staff. And that was a huge success, and it really helped to build a morale at our schools.
Thank you.
Tell us about your experience with special education and what you've learned supporting students with special needs.
Absolutely. So going into East St. Louis within my first summer of me being there, we were hit by the state. They had been under the Focus Monitoring Act, which is not a positive thing for underplacement of students for least restrictive environment. And I forgot to mention this earlier, but that was like a 9-year hit. So that's why the story is really powerful. It was for 9 years, East St. Louis was in that situation. So in my first summer there, prior to me school starting for the first time, I met with our special education director, and I also met with our part of our leadership team, and we went ahead and brought in parents, and we made some amendments. We looked at the law, we brought in parents, we did some IEPs. The goal at the time in Illinois during that tenure, it was to have 46% of your students in the least restrictive environment. East St. Louis was at 18. The year before they were at 20. They were declining, going the other way. And so after taking our whole summer to bring in, we brought in some additional help to amend and work with our parents to amend the IEPs. We were able to get it up to 32%. And by December of that year, they had removed us off focus monitoring, and we haven't been back. That's the technical side, right, and the placement of students. Then there was the side where we had RISE training, where all regular education teachers and special education teachers were trained on how to best implement co-teaching practices in the classroom. So that's been my experience with working with special education. And then also in Phillips, I had to make a similar change because it was under focus monitoring when we came into that school as well.
Thank you.
GRPS has both theme schools and neighborhood schools. How do we make them both successful? How would you address the divide in reputation and assumptions between theme schools and neighborhood schools? And how might you attract families to our neighborhood schools?
All right. So the first part of that, any school that operates, and this is based out of research out of University of Chicago, there are 5 essential elements that any school has that's really effective. Number 1, you must have strong leadership. If that does not just mean the principal, that means teacher leaders, assistant principals. So that has to be built, number 1. The second is that you must have a culture where professional development is a norm, and it becomes not just a need, but teachers' desire to want to continue to get better, and so does administrators. So building that professional development culture in your building. The third is that strong family community engagement. This isn't every single school, whether it's a theme school or a traditional school. These elements have to be there, and we must be able to reach out to our parents beyond just the walls of our school, going to their communities, picking up the phone, making calls, and also just expanding opportunity for parents to be involved in their students' lives. So giving the Facebook or the Google Hangout opportunity for a teacher conference, and not just saying you got to come in here in order for this to work. And it may be happening in some places in the district. I'm sure it is, but it needs to be a holistic approach. The fourth one is that you must have a strong culture where students feel safe, secure, and they're able to make mistakes. That is, so social emotional learning pieces must be in place. Bullying prevention must be in place. Teachers must feel like one of the greatest effect sizes when you look at the work of John Hattie, is teacher efficacy, right? So you build that through being resourceful, supportive, the whole 9, and that last one, which we all know, it must have a strong instructional climate in the school. And I could talk about those 6, but I'm sure that question is going to come up, so I'll wait to talk about that. As far as how do you change the reputation, we have to produce better results, number 1, and that comes through having those 5 entities in place. And the other part is, why not celebrate everything that's happening? Let's go big. Like, one thing I can say from JCPS that I've learned, we have an amazing social media culture there. And so tweeting is a big deal. They use Facebook, they use Instagram, and parents are communicating and connected, and so are students. So I do things like I'll go to a defense for one of those backpack successes, and all our students sign the release, and I'll do a tweet about, it was great to be in this young lady's backpack defense, and our entire team does that. So, and that should happen in every single school. And central office should be picking up on that if we're not. And I'm sure you guys have an amazing communication process and structure, but continue to push that. And did I cover the 2, or was it 3?
I think you got it. How to attract families, you covered that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Horton, you seem well-versed in various best practices and strategies within education today. How will you balance this knowledge with the need to maintain and continue strategies that are positively affecting GRPS?
I think that's as we continue to move, and we must continue to evaluate our work. And what I mean by that is, so one thing that I would like to do, and I met cabinet today, a group of amazing individuals, great team apparently, moving results. But I would like to do what we call these reality checks, where we have an opportunity to bring our maintenance and facilities team in, and we want to look at their data to see how often are they keeping up with the maintenance of facilities. How long is it taking for requests to be addressed? I want to bring in our special education team and identify, when we talk about placement of students, looking at our data to see how are we following every single process that's necessary to do that, and how many students are we placing over the course of a year. And I know you don't do a ton of placement throughout the year, but the amendments, and are we really placing students in a least restrictive environment at a rate that's benefiting all students? So there has to continue to review the data, always being aware of issues that come up and addressing it head on, and having a process for that. And I talked about that, the weekly reflections, as part of how I would be able to design some of the support. So when you're looking at these weekly reflections and you see an issue that continues to come up, we address that, and then we know there has to be some training or some additional supports that need to take place. And then myself, I continue to learn. Like I'm a lifetime learner. I consider myself to be well versed with identifying what are some trends, what's working, what's not, and getting into the learning myself and encouraging my team to do the same thing.
Thank you.
In recent years, our district was cited for suspending a large number of minority students and African American males. What would you do to decrease the number of minority students being suspended or expelled?
Yep, that's going back to one of the things I talked about in my presentation. Before we address it fully with the actual action of suspension, we want to work with the minds of the adults. I go back to achievement gap, opportunity gap, but it's an expectation piece, an expectation gap that we need to address, where we're giving our teachers training for racial equity and giving them also the implicit bias training, going into the campuses with our central office team to be a thought partner potentially, if the funding is there, to potentially add resource teachers for equity at the zone levels to help our schools do that, creating equity plans, because what I found in JCPS was really powerful. When you write that down and you put it on paper and you see that you have these discrepancies and differences and suspensions, you respond differently. And I believe that you heard the quote that my superintendent from East St. Louis put in there, public practice. We are a public school district, and we have to make sure that we are sharing our successes as well as our areas that we need to improve in publicly. And publicly don't necessarily mean on a website, but internally within the district and, of course, with the school board. So that's one end. The other part is giving our teachers also training for the trauma. Many of our students are coming to school with issues. They need to be properly equipped for that. The bullying training that needs to happen at every single school, in identifying that. We had a great prevention conference that took place last month, and it was amazing. Like I was guilty of this at one point, saying, "Well, bullying. I never got bullied when I was a kid. You just better get over that." We can't say that anymore. We have children who are, taking their own lives, and it's important that we address it head on. Properly equip our staff and our teachers so that they can identify it, and then you'll find an attempt to change how we're responding to our students. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. What do you believe is the role of athletics in PK through 12?
It's important. It's a big time. So I'll say larger than just athletics, but extracurricular activities. It's important. But athletics gives number one, it helps to create a healthy lifestyle. I wish I was still playing basketball. I'll be in much better shape than I am now, looking like a football player. But that's okay. But I think the athletics create the culture of being healthy, bringing team collaboration. It teaches some of the things that when I talked about that backpack of success skills earlier, it teaches some of those tenets when you're playing sports. And then for just extracurricular activities, period, it gives our students an additional focus and they're able to address some of their passions. In many instances, like I talked about the 89 blocks, we have a ton of students that was on that documentary who are now playing college football and getting their school paid for free. So it plays a larger role in just the development. And I think we should offer as much as we can to give students an opportunity to learn how to build that collaboration, teamwork, and just the healthy lifestyle that comes with that.
Dr. Horton, a lot of urban school districts face conditions of low reading and math achievement scores, high dropout rates, high absenteeism, and low graduation rates. Can you tell us how you would begin to address these issues in our district to increase academic performance and increase graduation rates?
Yes. So as I spoke about earlier, you heard me mention those 5 key elements. I'm not going to name them all, but I'll lock in on a couple of them. So it's really challenging to do this work alone, right? So we have to find ways to have that strong family engagement component. With attendance, I've been in communication with this organization. I said in schools today last time, but it's in class today, an organization in which they specialize in coming into districts. They work with Chicago. They work with some really large districts where they come in And they help the district organize how to get students in school on a more consistent basis. And they do these letters. That's not so. If you look at the average letter that we send home to parents about when students are truant, the language could be pretty challenging and pretty heavy. So they write these letters, and they also do another component where they will send a letter to the parent that will say, Devon has missed 13 days. Students in his class have only missed an average of 4. Oftentimes, research is showing out of Harvard that many parents are not necessarily all the way in tune when it comes to how many days their students have missed. And I understand that. Sometimes things happen, and it's not every parent, but sometimes it's like the ones who are frequently truant. It's opportunities to continue to put that back in their view. And the other thing that they spoke about, every district that they've worked with a foundation to pay for their services. So the school district, they reach out to foundations in the community in this area, and we don't have to pay out of our budget. And then they do this work, and they have saved thousands of dollars into districts because when students miss school, it comes with a cost. And they have some numbers that are really, exciting when they share that presentation with us, with the attendance. From the academic lens, that strong instructional culture, every single school, and this is, I can't say this enough. I believe the 3 big pillars here are that they're focusing on backwards planning, knowledge of standards, and assessment, mastery, or mapping. But I'll point out something. With this whole structure, if you don't have this framework of high use of standards, that's the only way we drive it. Data culture, strong professional learning communities. I talked to some principals today that have really highly effective PLCs in their school, but we want to make that district-wide. The third one, that instructional framework, the pedagogy. You address deficiencies for reading and these other areas by hitting head on with Tier 1 teaching. That is what we have to get. We have to equip our teachers with what they need in order to do that, whether it's training or whatever it may be, giving them those resources. And it has been researched pretty heavy that balanced literacy, that whole approach to guided reading, has been really effective. In East St. Louis, we use guided reading all the way through 6th grade. And we address writing, reading, listening to reading, vocabulary, all of these elements. And students, surprisingly to some, but not to myself and probably not to you, these students work in these stations and they address these areas every single day. And we have been able to, and making sure that they are receiving a nice amount of literacy time daily. That's important. And in the early childhood, we have to find ways to introduce our students to these, because they come in with a 5,000 to 7,000 word 5,000 to 7,000 words less than students who come from, well-off or affluent families. So we have to build this into our structure. And the last thing I'm gonna say with that is the summer opportunities. We need to really take advantage of that. Not traditional summer school, but opportunities, some things that we're doing in JCPS that has been amazing, to do karate and literacy. Partnering with some local organizations to offer a different type of programming that's not just come to summer school, do reading and math again. No, let's get them at the zoo. Let's get them at the museum. We have a school museum. Let's keep that going. Just different ways to address the literacy issues that we have. And graduation rate, the post-secondary push, I'll say this. Freshman year, it doesn't start in the senior year when students dropping out. It starts way before freshman year, but definitely in freshman year, we're looking at freshman on track data. We're looking at how many students in the 9th grade, if you failed more than one core subject, the research is showing your percentage of graduating in 4 years is very low. So we want to monitor FOT. Sophomore year, we want to do the half cap ceremony. We want to recognize, if you pull research, my researchers here, you'll see students drop out in that 9th and 10th grade level at a really high rate. So we want to do half cap ceremony, and it's like a graduation of some sort to recognize sophomores who, that have what they need, and we continue to push that. And then we do ceremony, and then we also have them to participate in some fun activity just to celebrate. Junior year, we're doing prep, SAT or ACT prep for those students. And then I talked about what happens in that senior year with the post-secondary push plan, where you are placed in the cohorts, and then we give you the support to make sure that you graduate. So East St. Louis in 2012 had a 59% graduation rate. When I got there in 2014 and I left in 18, it was a 77.
Thank you.
And dropout rate also declined, you saw in the report.
Dr. Horton, can you tell us about your experience with English as a second language and how new English language learners are best served?
So I would say something that we're doing currently right now at JCPS, we are working on an ELL master plan. And that master plan is to do a couple of things. Number one, we have taken all of our ELL students, and we are aware of it, and we want to do it differently, and place them in just certain schools. So we want to look at offerings on different sides of the town, where we can offer ELL programming at some of our other campuses. That's number one. The second thing is we have to be, when I talked about that teacher residency program, we have to do a better job of, just in this nation, not just here, of identifying candidates and teachers that want to teach ESL and work with students that don't this English as a second language, giving them the right training. And then some of our traditional teachers that don't teach ESL, let's find ways to give them additional PD so that they can better support students that sit in their class. Because and I don't know how it is here, but I know in some districts, if you don't offer the ELL programming at a certain school, then students have to opt out of the program and go into the school without the support. So, and we can't do that. We can't afford to do that here. So that's how I would want to work with that work.
Dr. Horton, how do we reach out to parents to let them know that Grand Rapids Public Schools is the place for their students? Many students on the northeast side of town especially select schools of choice or go to Forest Hills or Northview neighboring communities. What do we do to stop that trend?
Number one, going back to marketing our success, and you guys have done, like I said, some amazing work. It's a reason why the decline has come to a slow halt. You're marketing what's been successful. But the other piece is there has to, something that's happening in Ottawa Hills, right? You guys have the first year of the Career Academy for Hospitality. We have to expand our offerings, continue to offer courses and opportunities that students that's choosing to go to, families that's choosing to go to some of the other schools, give them things that only we got. And so I'll say, for an example, I think the middle college program that's also at Ottawa Hills, there's also another way that we can offer a general for all students where we did in East St. Louis a running start, where students are identified at the end of their sophomore year, they assess in, and we work with the community college here, or probably community college more than likely, and those students assess to get in, and then they spend their junior, senior year going to take their coursework at the local community college. And then they graduate. When they graduate from high school, they also graduate with their associate's degree, but they're still eligible to participate in school and in all of their school activities, band, athletics, the whole nine. So that's another offering. Now we work with our foundations, and if we can get our foundations to potentially foot the bill for students who qualify for it, and they pay for that. You pretty much in East St. Louis, we pay for it out of our budget. And so we have students getting an associate's degree off the district's dime and going into a 4-year college with 2 years of college already completed and an associate's degree and a skill. So those are some of the things that we need to do differently. To enhance, as I say, we have some of it, but we need to do it more.
Thank you.
Dr. Horton, some teachers coming into the teaching profession have a lack of diversity experiences with racial and ethnic minorities. How will you work with teachers and the teacher union to bridge this dynamic?
So there's some of the conversation I was having earlier when we're discussing teachers. We have those some things that I would love for us to do and that we're doing. We've hired resource teachers for all of our zones, and they go and support teachers around how to infuse culture responsive teaching practices into their day-to-day planning, into their teaching, the whole nine. Like that's one. The other component is when we hire new teachers, potentially we could also set our new teachers up for success by having them exposed when they sign on to go through some implicit bias training right out the gate. And some of the other trainings that may be necessary to better support our Latino students and our Hispanic and our African American students, offering different courses that make it a requirement when they're being hired. There are some other things we can do around micro-credentialing. I've learned about that it could save the district a lot of money, but it can also give our teachers a huge advantage when it comes to whatever we focus on, whether it's learning how to be equitable in their teaching practices or even enhancing Montessori opportunities for them. There's so much more that we can do with that.
Thank you.
Okay, this question is kind of cheating because it tries to ask 3 questions, but it's going to pretend like it's 1, all right? So, teach across the country under extreme pressure to increase student achievement. What specific teaching strategies do you believe would improve the teaching and learning experience? And which experts, best practices would you enlist to assist teachers in gaining additional skills?
Okay, so strategies and experts.
Right.
Okay. So some of the strategies for increasing the teaching. So the one thing I've learned, teachers don't want you to be prescriptive in how they deliver. So what we've done in JCPS and what we can do here is we can build this instructional framework for math, science, English, and social studies. And in this framework, it lends itself to offering best practice in these particular areas. So we offer the training, we provide the training, I should say. And then when we go, and then you just can't give the training without monitoring and making sure that it's happening. So we go to that system 6 I spoke about of administrators and coaches getting into classrooms, providing feedback on an ongoing basis, where they get feedback and coaching in these cycles. That's strategies we can talk about. We can look at Doug Lamov. He's well known for his Teach Like a Champ strategies, and you guys might think I'm joking, but there's a Teach Like a Pirate that's very similar to Doug Lamov, but it has some other strategies. There's so many different strategies that we can address and we can adopt. But I think more importantly for us is that we build that framework. And then we go in and we give our teachers options of what are some of the best practices. And we do this in collaboration with the union, because the union may want to come to the table and say, here are some best practices for math that we would like to kind of put on the table, and we build that out, and we can have a Grand Rapids collaboration on what best practices look like. And there are a ton, like I told you, there's a ton of experts that you can use, with Doug Lamont being one. We have the Danielson framework, which is not necessarily teaching strategies, but the process in which teaching should be delivered. Continue to live on that, and giving the most important part to this is giving ongoing, consistent, rapid feedback to teachers as they develop, and making sure that we have on our high end teachers who are masters at their craft, giving them opportunities in partnership with the union to help us with some of the teachers who may need some support. Like, this is not something we do on our own. We pull in our teachers from the union and say, let's do this together. So,
Thank you.
all right.
Competition between charter schools is becoming more intense nationally and locally. What do you believe can be done to reverse the trend of the exodus from public education that's taking place in urban schools?
Number one is performance. I think you guys have been a brilliant example as a district overall, the leadership that's here, of how to slow down to some degree the change, and then also opening up to being innovative for community members and partnerships with schools that are public, right? But we all live within this same frame, but we are continuing to look at opportunities for our schools to just be a little bit more, the way you guys like the theme structure. They don't always have to be things, but creating that training academy for that teacher residency. That's important, right? Being able to, and that could be a training academy school where teachers are developed, but we also offer potential some leadership courses. I think at Gerald Ford, we have a leadership curriculum that currently exists. Those are not charter schools, but we're doing things different at those respective campuses. So I think that innovation that has been here, that has really carried Grand Rapids, we continue on that journey. And then the other part is, when as the data, graduation rates continue to go up, performance and assessments continue to go up. As we continue to do that, we will have more firepower in regards to pushing back on that change. Now, I'm not saying that charter schools are bad. because I've seen some really good ones and I've seen some that weren't so great. But I do believe that we should be creating for our public schools, because I mean we've been tasked with this, and I believe we have the talent to continue to change the culture or the expectation around going charter versus our innovation or our theme schools.
All right, Dr. Horton, parent engagement is often lacking in public schools. Drawing from your experiences, how would you approach improving parent engagement in our schools?
So I spoke earlier. I'm going to say a couple of things here. The first one, I would like to give our parents an opportunity to get into our schools, not just physically, but also through some virtual structure, right? Where back to the parent-teacher report card, or if a teacher wants to see a parent, the options we can open it up where it's not always coming into the classroom, because a lot of times parents are uncomfortable going in schools, or they just don't have time, and giving options that way. The other component that I would like to do is to create, in order to get the voice, I want to create a parent superintendent advisory committee where we create an application and we have parents. Like I heard some really good things today, but not all the time does that voice make it to the superintendent's seat. So I want to provide an opportunity where I can hear those things. And if for nothing else, it's awareness on my end, and we can make some changes strategically to support them. And then I also want to get like what we call this is for community and parents, where each board member it's 9. So we got 9 months of school. We identify a month, and you guys identify a community or a neighborhood that we're going to take a school bus. We want to go in. We partner with one of our founders. One of the foundations, and we purchase some libraries for our homes, for our students. And we go and we knock on doors along with that board member, and we have some teachers with us from that school community and administrators, and we go knock on doors and we have some rich conversations. And we do that once a month in one of the different areas. That's part of going back to another question: how do we market and make sure that parents are aware? If we're going into that community where we're not getting many students from, it's going to be very hard for them, to not support, as long as we're going in with the right stuff. So I think the parent engagement has to go beyond it's not just the school's responsibility. And as you heard, it's one of those 5 tenets that must be in place for any effective school, any highly effective school.
Thank you.
During your first interview, you mentioned that you lost some of your fire while in East St. Louis. Can you expound on this and provide more insight regarding the challenges you experienced and the personal and professional lessons learned?
Yeah, so as I tried to build out the foundation, I did start doing some legwork and some research around how can we get some foundation support going in East St. Louis. We could not get it to move. I mean, it was challenging. The challenge being, just being honest, like East St. Louis it is transforming. It's a great place, but the history did not allow many people. No one didn't trust. Did not want to put dollars into the school district. So that's the part that was disheartening. Because like I was new, I know I wasn't going to do anything corrupt with the money. What I really wanted to do for the students in East St. Louis, when I built that post-secondary push plan, we had students who would go away to school and come back, and they would call us and call me too, and would not have a way to make it back to school. Like, I wanted to get a foundation to help us to just get bus tickets and laundry detergent. And we couldn't get anyone to jump on board to do that. So that was just a little disheartening to do that. But then going to JCPS, they have foundations, and people, they're investing, and I've regained that. And I didn't have to talk into the foundation today. I'm excited. It's just opportunities here that you don't find. And it's a great thing about working in different districts. It's like an appreciation has definitely has been developed for foundation work with that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can you discuss a plan, program, or policy that you were personally involved in that truly promoted both college and career development? What are the challenges of doing both in today's environment?
All right. So can I just reference to the post-secondary push plan? So I know you don't talk about that whole thing again. That was built by myself. That was designed by me. The challenges of that plan was there were early on, of course, there were like identifying opportunities that for that last cohort that I described, identifying like a ton of opportunities for those students. Eventually, we were able to build that out, and that was a challenge. The other challenge is getting parents to come in to complete their FAFSA. That was an issue, and I'm sure that exists in a lot of places for various reasons. I just think it's unfair that a student can be held hostage off their parents' finances and they're not able to provide W-2s. And I've experienced that in Wendell Phillips and also experienced it in East St. Louis. Thought that's pretty unfair. So that's a challenge. But overall, understanding, building culture and the mindset around the adults that's leading the district and in the classrooms, that there's opportunity beyond 12th grade for every single student to make it across your stage. We have to continue to support and build, and I know I feel it in the air here. You guys believe that the students can make it and do things special in their lives beyond just once they graduate. So that, like, we don't want high school graduation to be the greatest thing that you do in your life. And so we're responsible for giving them motivation. Some of the other things that we did, we continue to post on our doors, and I think I saw this in the school, like the colleges that we attended. That's important for students to see that, because that may just be the only people that they know that went to college or post-secondary opportunities. So those are, and then the last one, because it's not always about college, but the career opportunities, giving students the development and the training so that when they walk across the stage, they can go into a UPS, they can go into a GE facility or Amazon and become employed because they've developed the skills that's necessary.
In your first interview, you were asked to rank yourself from strongest to weakest in 4 categories. And then you said that you aren't weak in community relations, but that you haven't had an opportunity in this area. Knowing this and that you would be new to Grand Rapids, what steps will you take to prioritize in getting to know our community and building relationships with our stakeholders?
So no, it wasn't weak. It was like that. Remember the category? It was like, so I had the stronger. So.
Hey, you got this question wrong.
So it wasn't the weak. It was really, I was just saying, like, if I had to, like, there were 2 that was stronger, right? But the community, right away, I'm connecting with people in every conversation that I'm having. In the role that I currently serve, that's not a major responsibility of mine. Now I'm a part of. We have equity. We have racial equity discussions that I'm at night. In different schools, different communities are coming out. So to sum that up, I would continue to form those committees so that parent advisory, it's really parent and community advisory committee, that would be one. I mentioned wanting to get a bus or some sort where we would go out to the communities once a month and go knock on doors and work with the community to bringing those libraries to the homes of the students, but also having conversations with them in their environment, in their neighborhoods and on their blocks. That's some of the things that I would do. And then the other part, my outreach being once a month, I would do either probably a Facebook Live or potentially a YouTube, where I would have a discussion and open it up for probably Facebook Live and have a conversation with individuals who want to who have things to say, and I can respond through that process. That's how I would continue to reach out to the community, and I would be a part of functions that happen. I'm there. And the other part, when you talk about community, that's in order to build that strong career pathway, I will have to be an advocate of community support. So it's not weak, but it was just not the stronger of the other ones.
Our staff is composed of many talented, knowledgeable, and dedicated individuals at all levels who are looking to you for leadership. How will you go about getting to know them and their strengths and contributions? And how will you help them to build trust with you so that they're empowered to grow in their careers?
So I'll start with the communication part. I will have monthly, we have staff, teachers and staff gatherings where they can come into a facility, and I will always have an agenda with our team, with cabinet, and we will share things that we have happening in our district. So that's one. The other component is that I will send out a weekly message to our administrators regarding just things that we're working on or giving some motivation. Currently, I send a weekly email to all principals and assistant principals in the district and JCPS, just highlighting some things that we're working on and just continue to motivate. The other portion is that by providing our teachers and staff just some opportunities for career pathways. It just can't be, we got you in a teacher we have you as a teacher in the classroom, but here are some pathways, and here's what we're looking for as you continue to try to work to move up into other elements. And even for those teachers that want to stay in the classroom, which is great, giving them opportunities to be mentor teachers through our residency program and things of that nature. I'll be in schools quite a bit, visiting, talking, having conversation. And then we'll just and then when we have our monthly principals and AP meetings, I will definitely be a part of every single one of those, and having an opportunity to talk to the team and to the staff about just what's happening in the district. And I can say right now in my current role, I'm at every principal and every AP meeting now, and I have a session where I do trainings, and I lead it myself. It's not heavy, but it's enough to let them know that I'm interested and I'm vested in their development as administrators and as leaders.
Thank you. We are now going to take some questions from the audience.
Yeah, so does anybody have a question that you've written down? I could collect that, collect those. We're trying to, any questions that maybe weren't asked by the board, and we'll give them to President Grant to ask. So while I collect those, I'll give you one, and then you can start. If there's any others, please just give me the nod.
Okay, so this question is from Anne. She wants to know, do you value the arts to be as important to a student's education as the course subjects from K through 12?
Absolutely. The arts is it's a skill, like music, band, drawing, acting. Those are all skills. There are a lot of individuals who are making good living by going into the arts field. We can't. That's just like, it would be as if we were telling our students, no, put that down. That's not going to work. We can't do that to our students. We have to provide them with the opportunity to develop in those skills in those areas. That's important. I know tons of individuals that I went to school with that don't have student loans because they got scholarships for the arts. I wish I had a skill or a talent to do that. So absolutely.
I think we have one more. Okay. I'm going to get them both. Okay. We'll start with this one. What do you know about Michigan teacher evaluation system and how it is implemented in GRPS as it pertains to teacher retention?
Well, and what I know about it is that it has teacher practice, and student growth measures as a part of it. And I think the percentage for growth is pretty high,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken. There should be some, I think there are attempts to build some legislation around reducing the percentage for student growth being accounted in teacher practice. That is something that I believe in that. that definitely needs to be reduced. I use this just an analogy from earlier today when we were talking about standardized tests, and I think about the same thing when we talk about teacher evaluation. We can't. It's very challenging to just take the art of teaching and reduce it to the simplest form and not count and just make the science take hold. So the art is the actual work of the day-to-day, just the practice of working with students. That's important for us. We cannot afford for our teachers to skip town because they are being penalized in a profession that really we don't have the right level of respect that we once had. It's hard. Teaching is not a simple thing, and I believe that is contributing to teachers going to other places where that growth percentage is not so heavy. And we're dealing with that a little bit when I was in Illinois. And Kentucky don't have growth as a part of the evaluation.
Okay. This question states that the ruin of a nation begins in the homes of its people. How are you helping to ensure that parents send their kids to school ready to learn?
So that's much loaded. That's a pretty loaded question. I would say I'll start with this. Regardless of, and then I'm going to address that question. No matter who comes into the school, as teachers, as leaders, we are still responsible for supporting them with whatever we have. But from the parental lens, it is important that when we know students are deficient in certain areas socially, academically, our arm has to get much longer in reaching into that home to be able to support the parent. And how does that look? That's not something a teacher should have to carry on their own. We need to be sure at the central office level that we have resources and opportunity. I know there's an amazing, the parent university piece is great when looking at that curriculum, but getting it out and advertising it even more so that parents can see that it's there. And I know you're not going to reach every single parent. There are parents who just have things going on, and I get that. But we can't stop the attempt to reach them. We have to continue to do that and work to be as innovative as our theme schools are to reach and connect with parents who are not necessarily responding the way we need to. And sometimes we just have to reflect, if parents are not responding to us, we need to look in the mirror and think about how are we presenting ourselves that will make them want to respond. And that shouldn't be something that a teacher should have to take on by themselves.
There's 6 more questions here, and if we go reasonably fast, we have time. So let President Grant decide. About 5 or 6 minutes, 7 minutes.
Very nice way to pass the buck, Dr. Grant. So this question is from Nancy. She wants to know, how can we be assured that this will not be a stepping stone job for you?
Well, my family, they're not moving anymore. They said I can keep moving all I want, but they're not moving. They have been really supportive of me on this journey, and I owe it to them. And to be honest, guys, I want to make ground. I would love to make Grand Rapids my home. It's close enough to Chicago again, and I feel like there's enough work here to where it'll keep us grounded for a very long time. I have always, if I can show you with my journey in Chicago, I was there 14 years. And I was there for 14 years because I was continuing to learn and build, and it was home. So the last 5 years has really been a great opportunity to learn some other things, and I've learned quite a bit, and I'm very appreciative of those 2 communities. But I'm not big on continuing to move around and do different things. That's typically not how I operate. Understanding that a year ago, when I finished my doctorate, the university would not allow me to get my full certification. And so the Kentucky opportunity was really just to get some other experience. And I'll just say this, I believe JCPS and myself, we've had a great exchange. I've picked up and learned some great things from them. And I've been really beneficial to that district as well. Some really great people that I work with there. but it's really, my family is not, my ultimate goal is to be a superintendent. And I would love to be the superintendent here in Grand Rapids. And the family you'll still have my family if I was to leave, but I won't be doing that. I won't. I'm tired of this. It's a lot. Like, I drive 3.5 hours almost every weekend just to go see my children, so that is a lot. And I'm done with that. So I need them here with me. So that's it.
This question is from Mona. How have you been able to fight the pipeline to prison?
Many ways. So when I talked about the mind working on the expectation gap that currently exists in a lot of mindsets of us as adults, that's one. But the other piece is having that system 5 that I spoke about, having strong behavior interventions, like supporting students before it gets to that level, giving our teachers what they need so that they can not just, because if all teachers have was the option to suspend or to put a student out of a class, what else do we expect them to do? So equipping them with multiple tools so that they can work through the uniqueness and the challenges of dealing with urban students in America. That is how you combat that prison to pipeline, and not being so punitive in our actions.
How would you make sure that class size is recognized as an important component to student success?
So that is a conversation that we kind of had with my guy earlier today. Class size, while we know having less students in your class gives you opportunity to be more effective in many ways and have those relationships, I believe opportunities for, when we think about funding, advocating for dollars at the state level, we can't put that burden 100% on the district and say the district has to ante up more dollars. We're going to be advocating and for per pupil cost of students and things of that nature, and we get additional dollars so that we can keep the lower student to teacher ratio.
This is a good follow-up. Since advocacy for school funding and positive legislation has become a big issue, what experience do you have with politics?
So every day when you work in cabinet, it's political. But to get more specific, when you're making decisions about spending dollars on a program that will provide you with so many teachers over the course of each year versus bringing in a program where you actually can have some additional, I guess you can say, social emotional learning, making those decisions and seeing who's pushing that agenda. I've lived that, and I don't want to say anything specifically about it, but knowing that when you're making decisions, we have to prioritize. And when you're talking about politics, I have to operate from my core values of what's important, and then working in collaboration with the school board. What's the best decision to make, and where will we land in regards to this political issue?
So I'm going to read the question, and then I will say what I think the question is asking. How does the size of our administrative staff compare? So I'm guessing that means to your current district. If you think it's rather large, what can be done?
It was great to talk to cabinet today, because I don't think that administration is too large. What I believe is that when you listen to their job responsibilities and their roles, it's a lot of work that will not be done if you downsize. In comparison, we have a much larger, so that cabinet that we probably have a total of 25 some people. That's either executive cabinet or instructional cabinet level in our current district. Knowing that in order to move the needle and to get the work from the seats of the board through the superintendent down to the school into the seats of the students, you need strong administrators that can support that as the work moves. And then I could say I'll learn more about if there's anything unique that maybe there's some underlining to that question. I could find that out if I was selected and learn a little bit more. But from looking from the outward facing part, I don't see it. I don't see it. And the last thing, I saw a high school today with 1,000 students, and I see that they have 2 assistant principals. And where I come from, they have 4 with 1,000 students, and that is some things that I would, if I'm comparing, we have we apply greater administrators to. We have a higher student to administration ratio.
Thank you. And then for people's reference, how many students total do you have in your district? Just for
We have 101,000 students.
Do we have any follow-up questions? Well, I'm sorry, I was asking colleagues. Do you all have any follow-up questions or anything that you would like to? Okay. Well, thank you. That ends our formal portion of questioning. Again, we appreciate you being here this evening. Do you have any questions for us?
No, I don't have any questions. I just want to say thank you for the experience. It has been great for me to be able to learn and study about the great work that's happening here in Grand Rapids Public Schools. The leadership that was here, that's currently here, and the team, they are doing some commendable work. I understand the challenges of moving a strategic plan. I want to, kudos to them. But I'll just say also, if you're looking for a superintendent that's going to continue the trend of positive gains and improving outcomes for students, and in some instances accelerating that, I'm the guy for that. I said this a lot today, so I feel like I'm just continuing to repeat myself. I'm a tenacious leader, and I believe in leading by doing. And I will be in the trenches with the team as we continue to work. And again, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. It was great meeting,
Thank you.
seeing you again. All right, we are going to call this meeting back to order. Welcome, community members. Thank you for taking the time to join us. For the people who are just joining us for this second portion, I am going to run through some of the things that you've already heard, so just bear with me. The single greatest, most important decision that a Board of Education and ultimately our community has to make is around the hiring of our superintendent. GRPS has come a long way since the last decision was made to appoint our superintendent in 2012. Graduation rates are up, test scores are up, chronic absenteeism is down, parental engagement is up, and enrollment has stabilized. GRPS is gaining state and national attention as an urban turnaround success story. But make no mistake, we have a lot of work to do, and there is still a heavy lift ahead to build off the solid foundation that has been established. That is why it is imperative that we as a board and a community follow the process, engage the stakeholders, and take the time to make an informed decision. We greatly appreciate all of the students, parents, staff, and community that participated in this process and gave us honest feedback today. Just a few housekeeping notes. The same as earlier this evening, there are cards for questions. If you have questions for the candidate, you are welcome to fill out those cards and we will address them at the end of the interview. There are also feedback forms which are different. We will take those feedback forms and they will help us as we take time to think and reflect. So please feel free, please, we would appreciate if you would fill out a feedback form as well. For the visitors that we have viewing the YouTube channel, thank you for joining us. There is an email address where you can also provide input. That email is superintendentsearch@grps.org, and we thank you for that input as well. All right, so we have Dr. Talley with us, and we are going to get started with your presentation.
Madam President, members of the Board of Education, members of the Grand Rapids community, it's a pleasure for me to be here tonight to talk to you about how we ensure success for every student. Having strong academics helps ensure that Grand Rapids schools are my choice for everyone. And before I continue, I just want to say how great it has been to be able to visit schools and meet people today from various stakeholder groups. It has been quite informative, and I appreciate the engagement and involvement of everyone in this process. So tonight, my goals are to share with you information about achievement steering committees and how I have used them in the past to improve academic performance of individual students, for schools, and my belief that ASCs can be used in Grand Rapids for school and systemic improvement. There was a report that was written as a result of meetings with various stakeholders about the new superintendent. There was a list of challenges to be found within Grand Rapids. One of those challenges was related to achievement of students in traditional programs. I want to talk about how I have addressed student achievement in the past as a work as a community superintendent in Montgomery County, where I supervise 40 schools. So what is important is to understand the problem of practice as it relates to low achievement. You sometimes have schools that are underperforming overall, and sometimes you have subgroups that are underperforming. But regardless of whether it's overall or subgroups, we have children who are suffering because the children are not being given the opportunities that they should be. The problem of practice is understanding what within our instructional core is not working. Once we know the problem of practice, we can address the situation. Additionally, from a systems standpoint, we have to ask, are we supporting our schools with fidelity? Are we providing consistency to that support? Are we providing the right there and right now support that our schools need? So what are achievement steering committees? When I was a community superintendent, I had some underperforming schools that I inherited. I used the ASCs to support underperforming schools. So ASCs represent effective stakeholder collaboration. I have to stress the importance of a partnership and collaboration happening between central office and the schoolhouse. ASCs enhance the school improvement process by bringing resources to the school, additional human resources to the school improvement process, as well as the technical expertise to support that process. ASCs help to determine and identify the essential so what and now what of school improvement. These meetings were a structured review of school improvement plans with a focus on identifying the root cause of the problem and determining what possible solutions that can remedy those root cause. One of the things that's most important is our ability to find the root cause so that we are not chasing rabbits down the wrong rabbit holes. Too many times in education, we seek out the simple problem and not the root cause problem. And then by doing so, we are not applying the right remedy to the situation. And so that is why the ASCs really serve a powerful role in helping to find the root cause problem. So who was involved in this? So as you can see in Montgomery County, there was a cross-functional group of people involved in the ASCs. These meetings took place at the schools where there were concerns and had representation from the groups above. At the school level, you can see the many people who were there. We wanted a cross group of people, a wide breadth of people in the building. At the central office level, you can also see who was there. If there was a problem with or concern with math instruction, you had someone from central office who had an expertise in math instruction. If the issue was with students with disabilities, you had someone from central office at the meeting who was an expert in that area. When I think about who works in central office, we should be hiring the most experienced person who has the greatest skill in that area, because they need to be able to not only share their knowledge, but also have the ability to work with the adults who are daily working with the students. The power of the ASC is bringing their expertise to the school to support those who are daily engaged with the students. These experts also have a part in helping to determine the root cause analysis. How did they work? ASCs, as I mentioned, were held at the schoolhouse. It was important that ASC teams did a deep dive into student data rather than just superficial. All of us must know what the issues are. We have to work collaboratively to resolve the problems. It's important that you know that these were not gotcha meetings. These were meetings where all of us were rolling up our sleeves to determine how are we going to address these issues that are in the school. It was also important that key decision makers were in the meetings. So when people from central office came to the schoolhouse, they needed to be able to make a decision right there about how central office was going to support, rather than saying, well, we have to go back and determine if we can do this. Those at the schoolhouse needed to know that we were able to give them the needed support there and then and make those decisions quickly, because time, as the expression goes, time was a wasting. Another powerful component of ASCs were the collaborative school-wide learning walkthroughs. These walkthroughs helped us to examine the instructional program happening within a school. They provided times for school staff and central office staff together to examine how the curriculum is and isn't working and how to respond to those issues. What were the results? Well, we saw improvement in individual student data and subgroup data. We saw enhanced teaching and learning due to the professional development that was right there and then. School staff became more knowledgeable about the curriculum and the instructional program. We were able to bring specific interventions into a school and train the staff on how to use those interventions immediately so that they could start using them with the children. Training was also provided on data analysis. Not all of us are experts in the area of data analysis, and we had to train staff on how to use the data. Ways to enhance the school day were examined with changes to the school schedule as examined as well. We did modeling of lessons. We were able to share best practices across schools because as part of the ASCs, we would have peer principals on the teams so that they could share what they were doing and what they could learn by being part of this ASC. We also saw a stronger relationship happening between central office and the schools. School members knew whom they could contact for support. Staff in the central office actually saw what the teachers were up against as they were trying to teach the curriculum. ASCs also helped us to raise the bar by looking at ways to accelerate learning for students across all subgroups. So how does this translate to Grand Rapids? In your transformational plan, you gave as goal 1, strengthening and improving academic performance. The ASCs can be used as one method to get you to this goal. In Grand Rapids, I would start with the ASCs at certain schools that have been identified by the state as, quote, underperforming, a term I do not like, but it is a term that many states use to describe their schools. These schools are listed above, and I'm going to assume at some point in time you have been briefed about comprehensive school support and improvement, or CSI, as well as targeted school support and improvement, or TSI. So I'm not going to spend time on that. The ASC process could be used at these schools, but in a broader context, the ASCs could also be used to examine system-wide data, to examine what's happening at traditional schools compared to non-traditional schools. And is the problem real or is it a perception? We would take our new learning based on our review and examine the current improvement plan. You have a rather extensive improvement plan, so there's no reason to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Rather, let's use our review of data to determine what tweaks we may need to do. Much success has happened due to the current plan, and I believe much success can continue to happen with the plan after review. Who would be involved? It's better to cast a wide net first and then determine who needs to stay when creating the ASCs. So in looking at Grand Rapids, I've determined that these would be the people I think would be most important to be part of the ASCs. Again, it's important that we have decision makers at the table and people with the expertise to make those decisions. So if people who are listed above may not be able to attend, they have to be able to send someone who can and be part of the team and make those decisions. These people also need to know what resources the system currently has and also what research-based interventions are available. What would we examine? In Grand Rapids, we would examine several issues to include educational practices and interventions to address concerns. We have to look at the instructional core to see if our practices are meeting the needs of students. We have to examine our interventions to ensure we have the right intervention based upon the needs. If we have a child who has a reading decoding issue, we shouldn't be using an intervention on comprehension. Are we teaching our ESOL students and our students with disabilities at grade level? And if not, how do we address those concerns? And it's also important that we have parents in the school improvement process. Parents and guardians must be included because they are our partners in this process. We have to look for ways to enhance the school improvement process and system improvement because it's all about continuous improvement. The big so what of ASCs is that they can help us to identify specific professional development and guide the staff in how to match instruction, enrichment, and intervention with individual student needs. So in conclusions, ASCs lead to opportunities for students. Our role as educators is to ensure that our children have all the opportunities they can have for a brighter future. ASCs is a vehicle that we can take on this journey. And I'll open it up to questions that you may have.
I don't believe we have any questions. Thank you very much for that. Yes. Okay, so now we are going to head to our second portion where we jump into the interview questions. We will follow a similar format to the first round where we do a round robin format, and we will start with Dr. Flores.
Dr. Talley, what is your role in improving teacher morale? And please provide specific examples of how you would contribute to or facilitate staff support and morale.
I actually said to one of the focus groups earlier today, morale does not fall on one person. However, one person can greatly impact morale in a positive or negative way. And so as superintendent, I know that morale falls on me in many ways. And part of that is I can develop that by showing people how I respect the work that they do. I talked about my 3 R's during the first interview process, and I'm going to go back to the whole thing about respect, how I respect people for the job that they are doing, but also, more importantly, how I bring them into helping me make decisions for the school system. I think morale can be low when people do not feel appreciated, when they do not feel as if we are listening to them, and when they feel that we don't care about them. people come to jobs for a variety of reasons. One suspects and believes that they're coming to a school system to impact children. But in addition to that, they also have their personal lives. And how do I show that I care about who they are as individual people is also an important part of morale. I know in my past as a principal, as a community superintendent, I showed my respect, or I developed morale by being there with people, by doing the work with them side by side. So I gave an example of when I was a principal, I used to grade and with my first and second grade teachers, the reading assessments that were there. Teachers knew that I was there as part of the team with them. When I was a community superintendent and I had my 40 schools, I was part of going to school improvement team meetings to be there, not as a gotcha, as I mentioned earlier, but as their support for them. I often would say my job was to support and then supervise my principals. Morale is developed by the interactions I have with people, by having them see that I value their involvement and their role, and then also by how I lead and my leadership style of going forward.
Thank you.
Oh, may I just add one more thing about that? I think the other piece, and this goes to my whole thing about data, I would need to find out exactly where are the issues with morale. Is it tied to salary? Is it tied to not feeling as if you're a professional or being treated as a professional? The root cause, again, we have to look at what is the issue of morale? Is it real or is it perceived? Once we know if it's real, then we can determine a way forward as a whole group.
Thanks. I think that you addressed this earlier today, but I'll ask again. Tell us about your experience with special education and what you have learned about supporting students with special needs.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know if I really have answered that question to this committee before. Maybe we did, and I just have forgotten about it. I really don't know, but it doesn't matter. I told some other groups. Actually, I began giving the Woodcock-Johnson, if you know anything about the Woodcock-Johnson, when I was in college. I started actually working with college students who had disabilities, working with them to get extended time with professors, and also providing interventions and support for them. Braille books for those who had visual issues, writing notes for students who had hearing issues, and other things of that nature. So that was actually in college. From that point forward, when I became a teacher, I was an inclusion teacher. I had students in my classroom, even though I was the general ed teacher. I often would have special ed students who were included in my room. And then as principal, I relished actually participating in IEP meetings. I felt it was important that I be at as many of them as I could. And then currently, in my role, when I was actually executive director of student services, we met once a week with my leadership team of student services, also and the leadership team of special ed. We met once a week and we had what was called DRC meetings, Dispute Resolution Committee meetings. The purpose of that was to examine what were the issues in our school system related to special ed and 504 plans. From those meetings, we would look for any common themes that were happening across the school system. And then how do we do professional development to stop those issues from happening? Special education plays a vital part of a school system. It's a huge part of its budget, and it's also an area where a school system can go to have legal issues. And so one of the things that I would want to do if I were to come here as superintendent, I'd want to find out what were any OCR or Office of Civil Rights complaints that were called on us for issues we've had with 504 or special ed, and then examine those to see what we've done to ameliorate those as a system. Part of it is also the training that we have to do for staff and principals to help them going forward. You only need 1 credit of special ed to become certified as a teacher, and so a lot of it is building their capacity in that way. And finally, I'd look at, going back to what I mentioned earlier, are we teaching our children who have disabilities at grade level, or are we not? because what we should be doing is teaching them at grade level and ensuring that that's happening in all of our schools. And how do we scaffold for them going forward? So it's about training, it's about capacity building, but finally it's about ensuring that our children with disabilities are getting the quality education that they should have.
Thank you.
You mentioned doing your dissertation on school choice. Could you use some of your knowledge in this area to share with us how you would address the divide in reputation and assumptions between theme schools and neighborhood schools in our district, and how you might attract families to our neighborhood schools?
Oh, I didn't know you were going to pull back some of my answers. That's quite lovely. So yes, my dissertation was on school choice and understanding from a social capital lens why parents were opting for choice and other parents remaining in their base homeschool. And so what I found basically is that parents have a variety of reasons for leaving and for staying, but for the most part, parents who decide to stay because of the relationships that they have in those schools, their belief that the school is safe for them, and also the fact that their child is doing well in those schools. The parents who chose to opt out of their base school were leaving because of a belief that they would get a stronger education in a different school that's going forward. So what this means is that schools have to understand what their parents are wanting. And even though it's very difficult, and I put my principal hat on, it's very difficult for a principal to make a school perfect for every parent. What they've got to do is have those conversations with their parents to find out, what is it that you want in this building and how am I providing it for you? Parents have to feel as if their school is meeting their children's needs. Sometimes the reason why someone will leave is not based upon anything that's real or that's happening in that school from which they're leaving. They're just going. You can't control for that. But what you can try to control for are providing letting parents know what your school is doing for all children and letting parents see how their child is being able to achieve success in that building and the opportunities that will be available for their child there. We have themed schools here, we have traditional schools. They all play a role, but what we want all of our parents to see is that our traditional schools have the ability to meet every child's need and desires. And then the other thing I would just add to that is also I'm big about professional development and capacity building, and is to ensure that we've built the capacity and development, professional development within the traditional schools to ensure that they are able to meet the needs that are coming in their doors.
I have a follow-up question. Can I do that? Did you find in your dissertation a correlation with it being economic, poverty, and race? Could you comment on that?
So I've had some thoughts about that when it was going in, and it was what tended to be the situation. My Hispanic parents tended to want to stay in their base school over white parents who chose to leave their base school. Hispanic parents were more concerned in my dissertation, and granted, we cannot generalize it, but from this population, were more concerned about the relationship that they had with the teachers and the administrators in the building. That tended to be the situation that came forward. From my standpoint as a principal, when I used to do my principal lemonade, since I don't drink coffee, and I would do them in the community, my Hispanic parents tended to be more concerned about issues of safety for their children. And so it was very fascinating as I did my research, and some of it was eye-opening to me. So yeah, though I'm not going to do another dissertation.
Okay, Dr. Talley, you seem well-versed in various best practices and strategies within education today. How will you balance this knowledge with the need to maintain and continue the strategies that are positively impacting GRPS?
Will you say that one more time, just one more time for me, please?
Yes. You seem well-versed in various practices. You did get that part.
That's all I really want.
But the crux of the question, though, is how will you balance that knowledge with the need to maintain and continue the strategies that are positively impacting GRPS?
Okay. I just want to make sure. I appreciate that. I think part of it is trying to connect what I may know to what's happening here in the school system. But I also want to be very clear about this. I don't know everything. And I need to be surrounded by people who are experts in this knowledge as well. I have to be able to connect what I know with the history that has happened in this school district, because that way I'm not making mistakes that I don't need to make. And I also need people to say, well, by the way, Adrian, we've done that before, or it won't work here before, we're doing this now. The other thing I have to do is I need to be able to share what I know with everyone going forward, just to say, this is what we need to think about. I can't do it in a dogmatic way. Rather, I need to be able to do it in a thought-sharing manner. I mentioned to someone before, if I could do a Vulcan mind meld with people to share some of my information with them and their information with me, it would help in this process going forward. But the best practices are the ones that are research-based, and we know that they're successful, and then we've got to be able to see how they may play out here going forward. I talked about, for example, in one of the meetings, in multiple meetings, I talked about a program called Naviance to help with our 6th graders through 12th graders with college and career and life after high school. It's a program that I've used in my other school districts, and it would be something I'd want to look at, how do we bring it forward here? But I'm not going to say, July 1, I start my job, and then I'm going to say, well, we're going to bring Naviance here. No, I've got to have conversations with people and have them have me explain to them why I think it's important, what has been tried in the past, and how can we put this forward. I did mention to you before about second and third order consequences. Whatever I do, whether it's a best practice or not, we've got to think about those and what they mean for our system.
Thank you.
In recent years, our district was cited for suspending a large number of minority students, including African American males. What would you do to decrease the number of minority students being suspended or expelled?
This is similar to a question I had in my focus groups. It's very fascinating. I think next time when we do all of this, we're just going to put everyone together and we just have all the questions happening at once. So the prison pipeline is something of concern. And I mentioned this before in my other meetings, and I say this whenever I'm training new administrators. The power of a principal is not the power. But principals sometimes think they have all this power. I would be lying to you right now if I said to you, if I did not make any mistakes when I suspended a child. I did. And if I could, I'd go back and change some of that. What we really have to do is, how do we support our children? How do we look at restorative practices that are in place in our schools? How do we look at PBIS and other programs that support positive behavior? Then we also have to look at the capacity of our staff. I used this as an example before. When we see a young man in a classroom who may be walking around the room, it doesn't mean that that young man is not paying attention. It's just how that child learns. And if we don't know how children learn, we may think that a child is misbehaving because they are doing something that isn't just sitting there nicely and staring straight at the teacher. And so I would be very careful about looking at discipline plans. There should be a discipline committee in every school. That discipline committee should, on a yearly or every 2 or 3 years, be looking at their discipline plans so that they determine as a school, what are we going to do, what's important with us going forward, and it should be connected to the system's discipline plan or the student's rights and responsibility. Then we should also be looking at our suspension data. By and large, most children are suspended because of discretionary issues. I've worked in different school systems, and the data are almost exactly the same. The top 3 reasons for students being suspended are disrespect, an issue involving maybe a disruption, and then a third reason might be skipping a class. Those are discretionary, meaning the administrator has the right to decide whether to suspend or not to suspend. In conversation with an assistant principal once, I said, "You suspended this child because they were disrespectful." "Yes, we did 3 days." I said, "Why 3 days? That's what we always do." That makes no sense. What we have to do is have sensible plans in place, and then we also have to communicate them. There is a perception that's out there that if you don't suspend, you're not dealing with discipline. That's wrong. There are other things that you can do. I've known of administrators of a middle school who would hold a Saturday detention for children rather than suspending. No child really wants to come there for a Saturday, and parents don't want to come and get their kids on a Saturday. But that was a way to deter and hold down suspensions. So it's how you create a culture within that school, a culture of respect for the adults and for the children, and then also informing parents and engaging with them, having peer mediation as a way to resolve issues that are happening, and then finally looking at multiple tiers of ways of resolving concerns.
Thank you.
What do you believe is the role of athletics in PK through 12?
That's almost exactly like another question I had today, which is quite what a student asked me that question. Athletics, I'm going to also throw, you didn't ask me this, but I'm going to do this because I can. I'm going to throw in fine arts. I'm going to throw in any of those types of extracurricular activities. Even though fine arts may not be considered an extracurricular, I'm going to do it in this. It is about providing students with a way for them to connect to the school. It's also a way for students to engage in team activities, especially when you think about athletics. There is great research about students who are involved in these types of events can feel a connection to their school, and that's what we want, that connection to happen. But we also have to be very careful to ensure that the students are not forgetting about the academics. So we have to look at how they can be eligible for those events. In my prior districts, there was always eligibility rules, how many, what the grade GPAs could be in order to participate, and how often you would look at them. I'm familiar with some school systems where they look at eligibility on a weekly basis, and then my former system, we looked at it on a grade level, on a every grading period system. So athletics plays an important part of students' lives. It's a way for them to see their skills that they may have. Some children are born very athletic, and so shouldn't they have the opportunity to demonstrate that in a school event?
A lot of urban districts face conditions of low reading and math achievement scores, high dropout rates, high absenteeism, and low graduation rates. Can you tell us how you would begin to address these issues in our district and to help us increase academic performance and increase graduation rates?
So I truly believe that we want all children reading on grade level by the end of second grade, not third grade. I know that's the state rule, but I believe it should be done by the end of second grade. And so one way that we look at doing this as a possible way, it's way that I did it when I was in Montgomery County. We reduced class sizes for the block of time to a 1:17 ratio. We had what were called reading initiative teachers in every school to ensure that they had a 1:17 during that reading block of 90 minutes to 110 minutes, depending on where, what you were looking at. When we did that, we had no achievement gap in reading by the end of second grade. There's also training that has to be provided to your K-1-2 teachers on reading balanced literacy and what that means. And when I say training, not just for the K-1-2 teachers, it also means for their principals, so that they're right alongside of them. And I can remember being right alongside my 1 and 2 teachers, ensuring I knew what balanced literacy was, what it looked like, felt like, and smelled like in my buildings. That would be one way I'd look at it. The other thing is ensuring we have the right interventions to support children in the area of reading. Unfortunately, there are times when schools are using the wrong intervention based upon the needs of the children. And so I said it in my presentation, you may have a child who has a decoding skill, but you're using a comprehension issue. That's because of lack of knowledge, not having the right people in the schools to support that, and that includes a reading specialist, someone who is very well versed in how to diagnose the reading issues and then prescribe a plan to support that child. Then what I'd also look at the secondary level, because you have children who are coming in, something I've always thought about very carefully is English teachers are trained in English. They're not trained in reading. And so at the secondary level, you have to have those people who are trained in reading to do some of the work with your children at the secondary level who may not have the reading skills that they should have. I've not done this before, but I would love to bring a elementary reading guru up into the high school level to really work with your children who are behind the times in reading. Again, it's not because your English teachers are not able to teach English, it's that they're not trained as reading teachers. And so I would look at, then I'd also look at what other programs that we could bring in to enhance making reading more relevant to students, ensuring that they are having options to see themselves in the reading textbooks that are happening, and then look at technology. What are the technology advances that we could be using with our students to help them in the area of reading? I go back to consistency of program at the elementary level. Our children must have that at primary. I was never a K-1-2 teacher, but when I was a principal, having the best in those grade levels was important to me. Part of that is also ensuring that I am certified 1 through 8, but do not have me teach first grade. I also go back and look at, I'm certified, as I said, 1 to 8. At the middle school level, do not have me teach algebra. I would teach English and teach it well, but how are we assigning our people to the classrooms so that we have the right people in the right places that are happening there? And then finally, I think it is going back, and you have great resources here. You have the MAP reading assessment that's happening, MAP-R and MAP-M. Those are great diagnostic tools that are in place. How are we using that data to assign and create our reading groups? The DIBBLS program, those are all great things that are happening already here in Grand Rapids. How are we using that to determine how are we going to support our children?
Tell us about your experience with English as second language and how are new English language learners served?
So I've had the great experience of having worked in very diverse school systems, and I was principal of 2 schools, one in New York and one in Montgomery County. My school in Montgomery County was 55% Hispanic, and I had the largest population of ESOL and special ed students in the state of Maryland. I had 5 ESOL teachers in my building, and I had 4 special ed teachers in my building of about 550 children. And my PTA president, when I came on as principal, gave me a book on how to learn Spanish, a tape It was quite helpful. And so I've also, when I was community superintendent, I had probably the second, of the 200 schools, my 40 were probably the second highest in the number of Title I schools, as well as ESL schools with ESL children in them. And so I worked very closely with the ESOL teachers. I also worked very closely with central office to ensure that programs were in place in those buildings. I currently work in a very diverse school system as well, with children from over 100 countries and children speaking more than 60 languages that are in place. What's important is, going back to what I said about students with disabilities, are we teaching them at grade level? Are we doing the assessments that we need to do in order to find out where the children are? And then are we providing the resources in the classrooms to support them that are there? Again, as a teacher, you do not have to have any college courses in how to work with ESOL students, but almost every teacher is going to have to deal with that. From my day one as a teacher to now, I've always had to deal and work very closely with ESOL students. And then you have the kids who come from families who are migrating here. Their parents may not have the education, they may not be literate in their home language, and so we're trying to help the child going forward with learning English and supporting the parents. What's key, though, is respect for the families, respect for their culture. We want children to be bilingual, trilingual, if at all possible. It will help them in their careers down the road. And I was talking to someone else that I remember in one of my high schools, we would have our native Spanish speakers would have a class at high school level, and then many of them took advanced placement Spanish, and many of them passed it. Why? Because of what a teacher was doing with those students, getting them prepared. These were kids who were new to the country, new to that high school, but they were Spanish speakers, and so that teacher worked with them, and then the following year they took advanced placement Spanish, and they got advanced placement credit. So how do we take them where they are, understand the talents and the gifts that they have in their native language, and use that as an advantage to help them learn in English going forward? It's not easy. We know that children need about 7 years to develop the academic language of English. It takes time. And unfortunately, the national government and the state really don't give us the time that we need. So we have to chunk some of this. And one of the things I was most proud of when I was a principal was I used my 5 ESOL teachers and had them develop professional development for my staff. One of my ESOL teachers was the first nationally board certified ESOL teacher. So I took that experienced person and have her to develop the training that would happen in our building.
Dr. Talley, how do we reach out to parents to let them know that Grand Rapids Public Schools is the place for them? Many students on the northeast side of town select schools of choice and go to Forest Hills or Northview. So what do we do about that?
Yeah. I think part of it is we have to blow our horn even more. We have to let people know what we are doing well. We have to let them know the value of our education program. We have to let them know that great things are happening here. Their children are well taken care of. We're concerned about them socially, emotionally, and academically, and that our children will compete against the world. Some of that is based upon the data that you have going forward. There's a great place called the Clearinghouse of Data where we can track all of our students after they graduate. We know how many of them go on to college. We know how long it takes them to finish their 4-year degree or a 6-year degree. We even know their majors they're in. Are we looking at that? Are we touting that going forward? Are we sharing how much scholarship money our students are earning before they go on to college? Are we letting them know the types of jobs our children are getting into? you cannot blow your horn enough going forward, because some of what they're doing and why they're choosing is based on perception, real or unreal. But perception is just what it is, a perception. And so the better we are able to get our message out and to invite parents in, I think is very powerful. I said this to a group earlier today when I was a principal of a Title I school. I had a parent who came in, and I dropped everything and walked her around the building and everything of that nature. And she said, "This is a Title I school?" I said, "Yes." She said, "I didn't think that the kids would be so well behaved, and I didn't believe that the building would look so good, and all of this, that, and the other." I had to control my tongue. But her perception was this. But when she got into the building, she saw really what was going on. And so I think the more we can open our doors, open our schools, I think that will happen. And, you know, I met with the foundation. The foundation groups are here, they're involved. As I was driven around today, and as I've driven around myself, there's great construction that's happening. It seems like businesses are coming back in. I noticed, for example, there's a new hotel being built downtown. All of this has to be for the fact that there are people who are here, and people believe that the school system is working well and can continue to improve.
Dr. Talley, some teachers coming into the field of teaching have a lack of diversity experiences with ethnic and racial minorities. How will you work with teachers and the teacher union to help bridge this dynamic?
Yeah, I gave you my story about Bruce last time, one of my fourth grade students, and you know, I grew up, I guess, rather relatively middle class. You know, every evening we would watch the 6 o'clock news with Walter Cronkite, and then we'd have dinner. My mother stayed at home. My father was in the Air Force, and he would come home from work, and that's the way it was. And so when I had to deal with Bruce, I had to expand my own knowledge. And I just because I am an African-American male who's 6'6", doesn't mean I know how to teach every African-American male who is tall. I know how to teach some, but I don't know everyone. Just because someone may be Hispanic doesn't mean they know how to teach every Hispanic person. We all come to the table with our own biases and our own lack of knowledge. And so what I do with the unions, I'd spend my time working with them to say, how can we build the capacity of our teachers, of our support staff, and everyone involved? We have to think about equity and and social justice, and think about how we expand their knowledge about how to work with children who are different from them. When I was a community superintendent, I had my 40 schools. We did various book studies. Some of it was courageous conversations about race, or can we talk about race, and others along the way. The reason we wanted our principals to develop that language and knowledge base so that they can then work with their staff as well. And then many of my schools were doing their own study about race and equity in their buildings. It really is, though, about telling people this is not about the fact that you don't have that skill set. It's about how we build that skill set, how you come about it. I mentioned before about Gallup Strength Finders, and I know many of you may not know about it, but what I said before, it's about understanding people's strengths as opposed to your weaknesses. So how do we take what people do well and use that to bridge to what they may not be able to do well? And just because you may not know how to work well with a group of people who may be whatever, you may be doing something well with another group. How do we bridge that knowledge so that you can do that? And so that we don't come at you attacking you, but saying, we want to help you, and this is how we're going to do it. And then finally, I would say that we have to model this going forward. And so if I'm going to expect them to be learning this, I have to be learning it as well. I can't just say, oh, you go learn this because I think it's good. No, we will learn this as a community.
Thank you.
Okay, this is my time. I'm going to do a quick follow-up before I move on. That's all right. it's not going by, but have you seen, do you have an example of where this equity training really worked and it was embraced by the teachers?
Yes. So now I want to ask a follow-up question to your question. So when you say worked and then embraced by the teachers, do you mean that the teachers were open to it and that there were continued conversations about equity and race? Is that what you mean, or?
I mean that achievement improved as a result of it.
Yeah, so I wish I could say that the achievement gap or the opportunity gap doesn't exist across the whole country. It does. What we were seeing in Montgomery, though, we saw no achievement gap at the K-1-2 level in the area of reading due to our work in equity. And what we did for that to happen, we reduced class sizes in all of our Title I schools. None of our Title I schools had class sizes above 16 or 17 in grades 1, K, 1, and 2. And they had reduced class sizes in grades 3, 4, and 5. The issue with that would be the schools that were not Title I might say, well, how is that fair? And we used the data to show why it was going to be equitable. And so from that standpoint, that is one place I would say it worked. However, didn't mean that the achievement gap didn't exist in other areas. So for example, when we look at gifted instruction, who was identified as being gifted, there was an achievement gap there. When we looked at who was being put into honors and advanced placement, we saw that. But we did address it, we did look at it. In fact, I led one of the committees on AP and honors, and we saw improvement, but we weren't there yet of eliminating the achievement gap.
Thanks. And now the next question. So there's two questions here. And as you, yeah, so teachers across the country are under extreme pressure to increase student achievement. What specific teaching strategies do you believe improve the teaching and learning experience? And then secondly, are there specific experts in education, authors, et cetera, that you would enlist to teach professional development?
So with regard to specific activities to improve student achievement, you may not have used the word activities, it may have been strategies, maybe that's the word I should use. One is flexible grouping needs to happen as opposed to static grouping. I really shouldn't have to say this, but unfortunately I know that occurs. So what we're talking about is flexible grouping based upon the subject matter you're teaching and based upon the goals you're trying to reach. So for example, let's say you're in math class and you're teaching fifth grade math class, and it's the algebra unit or the geometry unit in fifth grade math. You should have a pre-assessment to know where your children are. And so therefore Johnny may already know all of that. But when it comes to division of fractions, Johnny may need to be regrouped based upon the fact that he doesn't know that area. So regrouping should be happening on a regular basis. Also, reteaching needs to be occurring so that we can ensure that when children are not getting the skill, that somehow they're being retaught that skill going forward. Then I would also look very carefully at the types of academic questions that are being asked of our children. Are they critical thinking questions that are being asked? And then also looking at very carefully at the work assignments that are being done or given to students. Are we looking at basic rote memory type of questions, or are we looking at things that are more problem solving and sorry, I'm forgetting the word right here, project-based type of learning going forward. So I would look at also cooperative group type activities as a skill set that would help our children with achieving and doing well. I would also be very mindful of the types of assessments that our children are taking, because I'd be very careful on how I say this, but not every teacher is a good test maker.
That's right.
And so we have to be very careful about what types of assessments are being given, and are we getting the good answers from good data about our children and what they're able to do and not able to do based upon those assessments that are given. So to your other point about the gurus that may be out there, I was talking to someone else about Fontes and Pinnell and the reading assessments that are given to our kids here in Grand Rapids. That's, if it's a reading assessment type of thing that we're looking at, I would look to them. But if you're talking more about other types of people, I'm drawing a blank right now. I'm just going to be very honest. I apologize.
I don't know their names either.
So I could have made up something and I was supposed to tell you that?
Room that would let me know.
Competition between charter schools is becoming more intense nationally and locally. What do you believe can be done to reverse the trend of the exodus from public education that's taking place in urban schools?
So I believe we here in Grand Rapids, we have only one real charter school, or charter organization, if I'm not mistaken. I think it all goes back to what we offer our parents. In my former district of Montgomery County, Maryland, there's not a single charter school going on there. There was one that tried for 2 years and it didn't succeed at all because parents were happy with the schools that were there. In where I am right now in Prince George's County, we have about 7 or 8 charter schools, but they may be succeeding because of the fact that we pay for the teachers in those charter schools. The FTEs belong to the school system. And so it goes back, I think, to what we look at with regards to our providing parents what they're looking for. Are we really giving them what they want? And I think that is a way to keep our parents with us, our children with us. And just communicating that and trying to find out why they're going to this charter school and then going back to blowing our own horn. I think charter schools is a perception by some that charter schools are achieving better. The data out there is not supporting that because charter schools tend not to have the same population as traditional schools. And when you look at most of the data that's out there, they do not the children do not achieve better than the children who are in the traditional schools. And so we don't want to compete necessarily, but you know what? I like to win and I like to make sure our families are happy and our children are in our buildings and in our schools. And so I would, again, have those conversations with parents.
Okay, Dr. Talley, parent engagement is often lacking in public schools. Drawing from your experiences, how would you approach improving parent engagement in our schools?
First, we need to understand that parent engagement and parent involvement can be defined in multiple ways. It doesn't mean that the parents have to be in school. I said this earlier today. Sometimes what we want is parents to be there to sort of check the homework, to make sure their child gets a good night's sleep, to make sure that they're having food to eat when they get home and in the morning. And so we have to understand what it is that we're looking for and believing in when we think about parent engagement and involvement. The other thing we have to do is find out what the parents want. I could be doing what I think is this great parent involvement and engagement activity, but it doesn't really get to what parents need for their own capacity. And so we have to spend some time going and then getting involved in that way. I also said in a focus group earlier today, how do we use our synagogues and churches as a way to engage with parents? They may not be coming to schools, but they may be going to their churches, their houses of worship. And how do we go there and use our connections with the clergy as a way to engage with parents? I made mention of a book, Beyond the Bake Sale. Beyond the Bake Sale talks about how to work with parents in multiple ways. So we know where they come: sporting events, chorus events, drama, and those things. How do we engage with parents at those events where they're going to be there? How do we make it meaningful? They're not going to be up there standing, droning on about everything in the world, but we've got to find out ways to engage with them there and then. Doing a quick survey with parents at those events is another way to engage with parents. Issues of parent involvement, those issues happen across all school districts. It doesn't matter if you're a school district that is extremely wealthy or extremely poor. Happens across all school districts. And what tends to happen, you have parents who are more involved at the elementary level and not at the secondary level. And what we have to do is help parents understand that they need to be involved K to 12, but then let them know what we mean by involvement. I think if we express to them what we mean, many of our parents will try to rise to that occasion.
Thank you.
Oh, may I just say a couple more things? Think about parent academies. I know we have a parent university here. That may not be the exact terminology, but I'm going to use it. And how do we make those parent university events powerful? So one of the things that I was doing in my role as student services, we would do trainings for parents about bullying, helping them understand what it is, what it isn't. And then also doing parent engagement about how to work with your children and things of those nature. So those are just some other examples.
Thank you.
In your first interview, you spoke of growing teachers. Can you please both elaborate on what you meant by this and also give some ideas of how you might keep high-quality teachers in Grand Rapids Public Schools and also attract more high-quality teachers of diverse backgrounds to our district?
So what's important is that what would be great is that every year when we have the first year class of teachers coming in, I'm putting myself in the role. As superintendent, I'd say, how many of you graduated from Grand Rapids Public Schools? We want to bring our people back. And so one of the things that I mentioned earlier today in another meeting was having a conversation with parents of our graduates to say, how many of them are going into education? They may know that, but we may not know. And so our parents could be a pipeline to get some of these students who are going into the field of education. Another thing that we want to do is using our first year teachers, the ones that we just hired, having them talk to their friends who are in a year behind them and having them go out and bring them in. They become our ambassadors. Then we also have to look at your various groups of, I don't know in Grand Rapids if you have this, but when I was in Montgomery, we had the Asian Educators Association, the Hispanic Educators Association, and the African American Educators Association. All three of them offered scholarships to students who were going to have careers in education, and then that way they would come back into the Montgomery County. And so one thing would be to look at how could we do that. I know we have our foundation, so could they offer some scholarships as well to different groups where we're trying to attract those groups to us. The other thing I want to say is in Prince George's, where I am now, we received a grant of X millions of dollars to support schools. And one of the things that it allows us to do is offer incentives for teachers who we hire, such things as moving allowances, a little bit money for that, or a stipend to as a signing bonus for them. So we have to look at what are the possibilities for us to get such grants, so that when we hire the teachers, we're going to help them come here. As a brand new teacher, I can go back 30 plus years and remember I was offered September 17th 2 jobs at the same time, one in Austin, Texas, and one in Fairfax County, Virginia. And then I was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? How am I going to, granted, my parents would have helped me move and all of this, that, and the other, but having a little bit of incentive money would have been quite helpful and enjoyable. So we have to think about how we try to make this easier. Another thing to look at would be, and some systems have done this, working with local apartment complexes and other things of that nature that would offer maybe a little bit of a reduced rate for new teachers who are coming in. That's working with your business partnerships and going forward in that way. So I think those are just some of the ways. The final way I would think about is this. How do we offer open contracts ahead of our other school systems? So you have Lowell, which is one of your school systems nearby. Do we know when they start their HR process? And then how do we start offering some open contracts to teachers ahead of them? Because it's sometimes the early bird gets the worm. And so that's something that I would want to very carefully look at.
Thank you.
Okay. Using the implementation of Common Core at the Department of Defense, how do you implement curriculum structures in the midst of community feedback that may be opposed or reluctant to make changes?
Remind me not to really give you guys too much in my neck if I ever speak to you guys again, so that you can't bring it back against me. So, yes. I think what you have to do is engage with different and various stakeholders in the process. You have to have them around the table so that they understand, okay, where are we trying to go? So let's use Common Core. Everyone may not be happy with Common Core, but we have to explain the why of what we're trying to do, and then the process of engaging with them in that so that we can move forward in the right direction. The other thing we want to look at is the so what of what we're doing. Why, not only why are we doing it, what's the benefit for our children going out, and what's the cost if we don't do it. Everyone may not agree with the final product, but they have to agree that the process was followed. And I'm very big about processes. The important thing is that we have a solid process that's engaging of stakeholders, that's opportunity for people to be heard, and that we're listening to them, and that we're taking their suggestions as part of the whole process, similar to what you've been doing with the superintendent search. But ultimately, a decision will have to be made. And I know, for example, we just did a couple of years ago here in Grand Rapids a new science program, and then I think we have a new math program that's going to be happening soon. So again, not everyone is going to necessarily agree with the final product, but that they were part of the process.
Okay, that concludes the questions that we have, but we do want to open it up and see if the audience has submitted some questions.
Dr. Talley, you are in English.
That is one of the areas I can do, English and social studies. Oh, yeah. It wouldn't be fair to the kids.
would not be. My granddaughter's home studying it, and doesn't ask me.
Okay, so our first question from Anne is, how would you ensure that the fine arts are 100% supported as an essential part of the curriculum, not just considered an extracurricular?
I had a conversation. I think fine arts are key because it's another area where children can express themselves and they have talents. And then also, how do you incorporate it within the instructional core program? In where I am right now, we have, bear with me, I'm sorry, guys. We have integrated arts program. It's in 80 to 90 of our schools where the core curriculum is taught through arts. And it really works as a way to enhance learning for students because some children learn differently, and the arts is a way in which to make it happen. And so I asked another person earlier today, I said, do our children have art, music, and PE in schools? Because that's very important to me, that they have those opportunities and that we have the skilled teachers in place to ensure our children are getting those fine arts abilities. So that's what I would look at, ensure that that's happening.
Wonderful. Have you ever used intrinsic learning in schools, and how does it differ from general education?
So if I'm understanding this correctly, intrinsic learning is more about what you're doing it for your, so if I'm intrinsically going to learn, I'm doing it for myself. I'm not doing it based upon what you're trying to help me with, and also I'm not in it to gain accolades for the fact that I've learned all these things. It's for what I'm learning for myself. So from that standpoint, it's about understanding how to help children understand what they want and need and what they want to learn. So children come to us, I'm making this up because I'm just off the top of my head. If a child really wants to learn about cooking, that intrinsically could be for that child because that's what they really enjoy. So how do we have a program that may be available for that child? So it's more about what someone wants internally as opposed to from the outside.
Next question is, GRPS has several theme schools. If given the chance to start a new theme school, what kind of theme school would it be?
I'm going to punt on that question by saying the following answer, and let me explain why I'm punting. There's no way for me really to know what theme school I would put in here until I knew all the theme schools in Grand Rapids, because you may already have one such program. It would be very almost malpractice on my part to say that I'm going to put a theme school about X, Y, and Z without knowing what are the ramifications of putting that here. Does it already exist? But what I would do is look at what is currently here and determine is there a gap in what's happening. And finally, I'm going to say this, and you have to, one thing about me, I like to cook and I like to compare everything to food. We've all eaten a piece of cake that was dry and horrible, but it had this great frosting on top of it. So the frosting doesn't make the cake, it's the cake that makes the cake. And so comparing that to theme schools, I have to be very careful. Am I putting in a theme school that's supposed to really make a difference, or am I trying to correct something that may be missing? And so I want to look at making sure that what we have is working before I throw in some other type of frosting on top of it. Hopefully that comparison made sense.
That's the last question.
Okay. You have mentioned several committees or groups of people that are meeting to discuss what's happening in schools. How do you hold these without simply adding to teachers' already very full plates?
Great question. I think, and to meet just to meet is a waste of everyone's time. So one has to be very planful in these meetings that are occurring. Also, one has to have volunteers to participate in them. And then finally, you have to be you have to prioritize. What are the ones that that are most important for us? I'm not here to say that I want to put people in multiple meetings. The ASC was an example of a committee meeting that was happening at schools because your schools should already have a school improvement meeting. It wasn't an additional meeting, it was part of meetings that were already occurring at that schoolhouse. So I assume if you're all about school improvement, you are doing school improvement meetings already. So how do we make those meetings more robust as opposed to more often?
As a leader of the district, what would you do to help fully staff all departments from teachers to maintenance?
I mentioned in my last time about the 3 Bs, bodies, books, and buses, and so we're talking about bodies here. Do we have all the right people in place? I know one of our schools here is without a principal, and you didn't fill it because you wanted to make sure you have the right person who's there. Understand, and that makes sense to me. And so I think we have to go out early and make sure that we are trying to fill these positions as soon as possible, as opposed to waiting. I go back to what I said about open contracts. My current system I'm in, when I told the HR people about open contracts, they were like, what are you talking about? And so we have to get these positions filled. We have to build our own. We have to look for the people who can fill them, and we have to borrow people from other districts if necessary, enticing them to come to our great district of Grand Rapids.
How will you ensure that LGBTQ students and staff are heard, that they feel safe, and that they feel secure?
So that's part of the social emotional learning that we need to have in place here. That all falls under the equity framework as well. And so how are we addressing this and building capacity of staff and how to work with all of our students? We have to look at having possibly, I know my school system, some of my high schools have gay student alliances in place. So that would be a possibility to have going on. But all of our children must know that they have people that they can depend upon in these buildings. That every student should know one person that they can trust in that building who will keep them safe. Whether it's a custodian, whether it's a secretary, whether it's a principal, whether it's a teacher, whomever. And so I think we do that through our lens of equity and through our lens of ensuring success for every child.
How does the size of our administrative Franklin campus compare with the support staff of your current and former districts? Is it too large?
I think we are maybe comparing apples to oranges in some ways. My school district in where I am currently has 132,000 students. My prior district, Montgomery County, has 150,000 students, 200 schools in both of those districts. So maybe comparing apples and oranges when we're looking at central office here and central office there. Central office in those two districts are much larger than they are here. The question is, are we using, you can be bigger, smaller, but are we using them effectively? And have we hired the people, and make sure you understand I'm not saying that you haven't, have we hired the people with the expertise and the know-how who can support our schools in the, support the schools? Here's what I would also say. There are some who believe that central office can be overloaded. You must have a central office. you can't run a school system without a central office. You have to have someone there who's overseeing principals. You have to have a curriculum supervisor of some sort. You must have certain positions. You have to have athletic director. These are roles that are there and have to be there. You have to have student services. And so cutting out central office means you are cutting out support for schools. What people have to see is how central office is making a difference in the schoolhouse, and not see that these are people just sitting there at central office doing nothing and twiddling their thumbs. Every school system has a central office.
Okay, this is the last question.
No.
According to data released by the Michigan Department of Education, teachers in Michigan make less on average now than they did 10 years ago after adjustment for inflation. Do you see considerable increases to teacher salaries as a necessary step in attracting and retaining quality teachers in our district?
I think we need to pay the teachers at a professional rate. I truly believe in that. However, I know, everyone knows that we don't have a money press in our basement that we can start printing out money to make it happen. The system, meaning the state, must provide those funds for us. We get a lot from the city as well, but a lot of it is out of our hands with regards to our funding. And so we've got to look at that. And we had a conversation about this earlier today, where I think Michigan is now the 50th state for per pupil spending accountability, is what I was told. So I think we have to look at, we have to marshal our troops, if you will, get the state, and I think the fact that we will be having a new state superintendent may help in that going forward.
Do we have any follow-up questions from my colleagues? No? Okay, well, that concludes our formal questioning portion. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. And I want to make sure that you have a moment for closing comment.
Thank you. So I'm going to end by talking about opportunities. And this is what's most important to me. I'll be very quick because I have a basketball game to watch tonight. And we're going to win our first one. So one of the great things I had when I was community superintendent was sitting on stage and shaking the hands of all the graduates who walked across the stage. There was such joy out of the children as they walked across the stage. But the question that entered my head was, what opportunity do these children have? And does each child get to choose their opportunity, or does the opportunity select the child? When you graduated from high school, hopefully you got to select your opportunity and not that opportunity saying, this is all you get. You have to come to me. The goal of us as educators, and my goal, is to ensure that when children walk across that stage, they have all these opportunities available and they select the opportunity. Not that opportunity saying, I'm all you have. And so in my years of education, what I've tried to do is ensure that our children have those opportunities and that they have success in their futures. I thank you for this opportunity, and I appreciate the hard work you have over the next several hours. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. We are now going to take a break for a few moments, and then we will come back for some discussion. Thank you all for your patience. I am going to turn it over to Dr. Green, who will help facilitate this conversation as we really just take some time to go through our thoughts.
Thank you. And thank you to all the audience members that are here and are staying with us. We appreciate that. And thank you to the board. It's been a lot to do this afternoon and evening, and so we appreciate that. So what we'd like to do, in front of you, you also, besides the input and the feedback forms, you have the criteria that we developed a couple of months ago when we started this process. So I'd like you to have that handy as we start this discussion. And basically, what I'm interested in doing is just discussing the candidates, and start with Dr. Horton, since he was first, and just ask you to talk about some of the things that you liked about the candidate, the positive attributes, and how that compares to the search criteria. If we could have some discussion on that. And basically, I'd like to stick with the positive attributes of each candidate, so we'll start with Dr. Horton. Would anyone like to start first?
I can start. From observing his interaction with community and students today, and just hearing some of the dialogue in both of those settings, it appears that he was well received as authentic and as well as caring, and people seem to be excited about his passion. We do have two very qualified candidates, but I think some of those soft skills were some of the things that I was impressed that the students and community appreciated about him.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
No, I was quite impressed with his knowledge of curriculum.
Okay.
The idea of teacher morale was also a good answer, at least addressing that issue. Also, I wasn't sure exactly.
Your mic?
His special ed. I wasn't exactly sure what he meant in his special ed answer, but I know he was concerned about special ed and wanted to address it some way.
Thank you. Other comments?
I know I kept being concerned about his experience, but he was clearly able to learn a lot from all of his experiences. I was pretty impressed with his knowledge, his background, his breadth of, he definitely seems to be, I mean, it wasn't just saying stuff that was apparent as being a quick learner, so to speak, but he seemed to have some depth to the answers he gave too, so.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Flores?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think that he was not just filled with rhetoric on what needs to be done, as if he had read a narrative somewhere. He I think, brought, as Kim said, authentic answers to very difficult questions, and I think that that he drew from his experiences, from what I can see from his resume and from the 2 interviews that we've had with him, that he's a practitioner. I mean, he's been in the classroom, he's been at the building level as an administrator, he's been at the district level. I think he'd be certainly good for teachers, and good for students and good for community. From the quick survey we've done, he seems to be head and shoulders above in terms of the candidate field that we've interviewed. So
Okay.
I'm impressed.
All right, other comments? Ms. Davis?
I was impressed with what the research he did on our district. I thought he seemed to know quite a bit about our district, and I also felt like he was comfortable.
Okay.
I enjoyed his presentation. I thought there were parts where he was talking really fast, and I had to kind of absorb it myself. But I thought that he prepared his presentation well, and I was very interested in what he had to share. It was well organized.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ross?
Come back to him.
Okay. Ms. Shockey?
Yeah, not really anything that hasn't been said already. I definitely found him to be genuine and authentic. I think that's really important. That certainly was reflected in what we read from the focus groups today. Yeah, I know he was eager to share as much as possible with us. I can imagine, well, I do know what that's like, having sat across there in an appointment, you do want to share as much as you can. But yes, there were times when I wanted just a little more content, about a particular thing than a breadth of everything. But it's clear that he's done some really great work.
Thank you. Reverend Matthias?
Yeah, I think it was certainly could relate to where he came from, the inner city, and really struggling to make it, and having made it. I do see the breadth of education that he has coming into this position, and some broad experiences in, from the teacher to being an administrator. So.
Okay. Ms. Grant?
Yes, I feel like today spending time with him for a second round definitely allowed me to learn more about him and answer some questions that I feel like we all had about experience. So that was really helpful to hear him be able to speak to more of that.
Okay. Thank you. Anything, Mr. Ross?
Yeah, I think the first interview, I was sort of feeling uncertain as far as what his foundational philosophy was. I think I got a better sense today, and I did appreciate some consistency in some of the responses as far as referring to those 5 principles of strong leadership, PD culture, parent-family engagement, and, the other couple things associated with that. And those seem to come up, in multiple answers. And I think that sort of foundational component to his philosophy, I did appreciate. It helped me get a sense of, I guess, what I found important to him. And another answer, he did allude to resting on his core values when it comes down to it. And, I think I could appreciate that, whether the values are necessarily always in line with what any of us may think. I can definitely appreciate someone, having a core and a foundation in which their decisions are being based.
All right, very good. Can we move on to the second candidate, Dr. Talley? Would anyone like to start out?
I can start. I was very impressed with his presentation. I liked it probably because it's very similar to something that we do here in terms of helping schools and helping teachers and so on. So I really liked his presentation.
Okay, other comments?
I was impressed with his years of experience, and his sense of humor was engaging as well.
Okay. Anyone else?
I was impressed with his organizational skills, his analytical skill set, his presentation skills. Certainly, he did not lack for expressions in language, very clear, and included the humor. So I think certainly he's definitely a very good candidate, too.
Thank you. Anyone else? Reverend Matthias?
Yeah, I think that I was impressed with his ability to get into the nitty-gritty of things. So he just didn't answer it on the surface, but he actually broke areas down so that we would be able to understand, and then connected areas of thought in terms of what we were asking. I thought that he took every question and that we asked around table, and was able to discuss at length some of those issues given the constraints of time. So,
very good.
I like that he didn't just talk about programs as solutions. He talked about getting to the root cause of an issue rather than just trying to program our way out of things. So I really appreciated that his answers had depth. I agree that he also, I think, was very well articulate, presented well, and I found him authentic as well.
Okay. Kim?
I agree. I feel he was well-spoken, articulate. I liked his references to system work. He spoke about finding the root cause for things at the building level, but also at the system level.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, his background is really impressive. I was, like Dr. Flores said, his analytical abilities was pretty, I mean, the way he responded to my follow-up question on this equity wasn't just a response on what the professional development was, it was how it was implemented strategically with data and with a purpose, with a specific set of outcomes, such as understanding why one school was getting different resources than another school. So incredible analytical work there, and definitely well researched. So.
Okay. Who else? Reynard?
I guess I can say that I did appreciate that he seemed to be open-minded. I didn't get the sense that there was a particular agenda or a particular thing in his tool chest that he was insisting on trying to bring to GRPS. And, I guess just what I'm getting at, I got a sense that he would be intentional on trying to get a feel for the landscape of things prior to making any maybe significant decisions.
Okay. Ms. Grant?
I really appreciated some of the knowledge that he, or experience that he spoke of when it came to having an education that was custom for the children in the classroom. So when he talked about getting students to grade level in reading and some of the tactics around that, as well as the flexible grouping versus static grouping for children, so a student can understand that I may excel in this one area, so or not even just in one subject, but in a certain area of that subject, and in another one I may need to relearn, and making that okay. I really appreciated that.
Okay, so you've talked about some of the things that you like about the candidates. So how does it compare to the search criteria? Look over the search criteria and try to make the connection between what we were looking for and kind of what we've learned. And I guess I'd ask the question: is there more information that we need, or are people ready to narrow the field further? I mean, it's not to say you have to make a decision tonight, but it's a possibility of narrowing the field. We have two candidates. We are able to narrow it if you choose. And so I would ask, how does it compare to your search criteria? And is anybody ready to make an avocation for one candidate over the other?
I don't get the sense that we need more information from that. I think that this is pretty exhaustive.
Yeah, got a lot of information.
And I know a lot of the people who wrote these statements, and I trust their feedback. And the things that I found lacking in the candidates, they're not going to fix by giving us more information. Okay. or another interview. So I think that. Although I didn't think this was true at the beginning of the day, but today I think that both of them could make great superintendents and could make good superintendents here. I'm not convinced yet that that one of them should be the superintendent, and my issues are that there were some areas that I thought were pretty key. So such as like ELL or really they both come from school districts that are very racially diverse. And they both had more than one experience with racially diverse school districts, but I still didn't think that they had a lot of experience understanding the distinctions within those school districts, or even some of the things that this board has debated, on ESL versus bilingual versus PSYOP. I mean, those are things that we probably need to grapple with at a more serious level, and I didn't get the sense that either of them had grappled with those, and I felt that way about some other issues, such as special ed, other areas where we know we need to really dig in and work harder, and I didn't get the impression that either of them had that experience. That's not to say that they couldn't do good. I'm not 100% there yet on either.
I just think we need more time. I cannot make a decision until I've gone through all these things, and I think it's a disservice to the people who took the time to come to these focus groups and make their comments and write things up for us, and for us to just kind of, get them at the last minute and kind of scan through them. I really would like more time to look at these more carefully and make my judgment based on the people who are probably going to be the most affected by any decision that we make.
I would also like to say that the information given today was wonderful. It sounded amazing. And I don't doubt that all of it is very true and very correct. But I think it's our job to do due diligence. I could sit here and throw out 1,000,000 stats for you. 10% graduation rate to 99% graduation rate. It is our job to go find out that that is in fact true, that that is in fact what happened in that district, and to know for ourselves, because it sounded amazing, and I want it to be true, because I'd love to see those things reflected in our district. But I think it's our due diligence to confirm that that's an actuality on a lot of different levels. And so, to me, I do not have enough information to make an informed decision.
Other comments?
Well,
Dr. Flores?
I'd like to echo Dr. Baker's comments about both candidates and their answers regarding ELL students and how you handle those, or how you instruct them and ensure that that they're getting all the resources they need. However, I think that, time, either one of these candidates would certainly be able to gauge what community interest is and review the available research and determine what the best way is to approach the instruction of ELL students and how we can do better than what we currently are doing, from my perspective. I think that there is a wealth of information here. It is probably going to take us time to review it all. I think, though, that there is an imbalance in terms of which candidate seemed to prevail best and impress best the students, the teachers, the administrators, and the core interest community groups that we have. I think it's quite obvious in reading that in the cursory review that we've had to do here. I think, we were impressed, or we weren't impressed, and a decision does need to be made. But for some, I think that perhaps a little more time is appropriate, and I'm comfortable with that. At this point, I currently favor one candidate over the other. I think, Dr. Horton prevails. That's my opinion, and I'm, prepared to advocate for his placement. If, however, there's some concerns, I'm certainly open to discussing all of those in full detail.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think my perspective right now sort of falls in between Dr. Baker and Dr. Flores, in that I do think out of the two, if I was only selecting one of those, I would have a preference if I was simply limited to those two. But I'm not right now 100% comfortable even with the one in which I would have the preference. Maybe some time in reviewing things a bit more, and maybe to Ms. Grant's point of even doing a little more research to verify some of the information we were given might be there.
Okay.
Other
comments?
I would agree with all of your comments, and I was a lot more impressed with Dr. Horton tonight than I was with the first interview, and more excited about that possibility. However, I still have some reservation. He speaks of all of these programs, and they all sound wonderful, but my wonder is, are those just the programs that he's been exposed to? And I kind of think of it as a student teacher. I'm exposed to that one teacher that I'm under for 6 months to a full school year, and I can speak highly of all the things that I found wonderful about that one teacher that I'm under. And I can move into my own classroom and only utilize those wonderful things that that teacher exposed me to. But I'm not quite sure that he's giving us things that are authentic to him outside of what he's been exposed to.
Okay. Other comments? Reverend Matthias?
Yeah, I think, at least for me, I'm not ready to make a decision for either candidate, although they were impressive, certainly their education, their capability in terms of being able to dive deeply. I think one candidate had more of the analytical skills than the other, or at least in the moment, I can understand the pressure of having to be in front of so many different, a diversity of group of such as ours, our teachers, our parents, our students, our administrators, this board. And so, I think our district needs someone that understands our district and can take it to the places where we want to go. So,
Okay. Thank you. Did I hear from you, Mrs. Williams?
I do believe that of the two candidates, there was one that stood out more. And just from my observing his interaction today, I believe Dr. Horton made more of a connection with our students' community than Dr. Talley. And it does kind of appear to initially be that way in the feedback that we received. I don't necessarily have any reservations with regards to him being our final candidate as much as, I think it would be hard to say just we're gonna find the perfect candidate, and that these limited interactions will allow us to be able to say fully and completely that I am confident that we have found that person. To me, the reality is time will tell, and I have to make the best choice based on the information that I have and my intuition with regards to that. And so that is how I plan to proceed, because frankly, I don't know if the perfect candidate was sitting right in front of me, if I would feel any different. So.
Right. That's probably a little philosophical, but pretty true. Very good. Thank you. Who else? Ms. Schottky?
Yeah, this is tough. This is hard work. It's important work. I guess I'm going to speak knowingly from my own biases here. And so I was listening for someone to speak to the areas of impact that I have some level of expertise, those being community engagement, career-focused academies, and then the schools that my children are part of, IB and Montessori. I didn't hear any of those areas where there were examples of impact that they had engaged in. And so I personally was really looking for that, although I was incredibly impressed about other areas where I wasn't looking. So that being said, where I'm at is that I'm not ready. So I really want time for reflection on the materials that were presented to us today from the community, because that's who I need to listen to, because I am coming from my own bias, and I need to have time to hear from those that have other expertise than I have. So that's where I'm at. I just would like some time.
That's fine. Mrs. Grant?
I believe I.
Did you speak already?
Yeah,
Thank you.
If we can continue it. One thing I would say, and this isn't meant to be a critique of any particular candidate. I want to hand over the keys to this district to somebody that we do think is the perfect candidate for this district. So I think that I'm not saying that we don't have that person in these two candidates, but when I vote I've talked to people from my experience with the superintendent before last. There were board members who told me that they reluctantly voted for that superintendent. I don't think that the next superintendent wants a board that's reluctant to hire them. And so I think that we need to be really sure. We could be wrong. And so I certainly know that I could be wrong in thinking that somebody's a perfect candidate. But if we don't hire that person this week, but we hire that person next month or next year, I want, when we hand these keys over to this district, because a lot of people in this room, my children, our children, the consequence is pretty great if we make a mistake on that. And so I would say we hold out for the perfect candidate. Now that, again, I'm not suggesting that one of these two isn't. I'm not convinced yet that one of them is, but I could learn more. But I am going to say that we should not, under any circumstances, think that this is the best we got. So let's just give it to the best of the two. We got a lot more at stake, and if we got to keep having late night meetings with our community to determine how to do the right thing, then we should just do that, because there's just too much at stake. The future of this city is at stake. So.
Yes, I totally agree with Dr. Baker. I also, if anyone is using the language of, and this has at this point nothing to do with the two candidates, but this is me speaking to my colleagues, but the language of if I have to choose, or feeling rushed, is no point. I want you all to know from me that I want no one to feel rushed or pressured into making a decision. We shouldn't be doing that to each other. We should be taking our time and being thoughtful, and we should be at the point where we feel like we need to make an offer because we don't want to lose this person, because they're so amazing that let's bring them in and get started on this work together now. And that is where I think we should be. So I caution if anyone would make us feel rushed or forced into a decision. And like Dr. Baker said, there are many of us who have our children, our grandchildren here, and that is top priority. So people who may not have those same stakes, I ask, what is the rush, or what is the motive there? So I thank you guys very much for taking this decision so seriously, and for taking time and feeling free to share your true thoughts about the process. Dr. Green,
Other
do you have
comments?
anything else for us?
So then the question I would ask is, what are the next steps? Now, we do have a backup meeting, which we set this later on this week. And so I asked earlier, is there more information that is needed, or is there just more reflection? I kind of heard that there's more reflection amongst the board members, and the reading of the feedback and reading your own notes and reflecting upon some of the answers that were given and some of the things that you know about the candidates. So what's the thought? Do you want to do anything in particular between now and Saturday? Do you want to meet again on Saturday? What is the pleasure of the board?
I would like to request some more information, and so I can get that to you specifically, what I would like to request, and I believe that we can all submit that as well if there's more information that you all feel would be helpful to help you make a decision. And so I will share that
absolutely.
information. We do have Saturday on the books. We have a Monday night board meeting. We all feel comfortable with that timeline, with that Saturday.
Yeah,
session scheduled.
In terms of communicating with the candidates, is there anything particular? I mean, just that the board has not decided, the board is going to continue to reflect. We have another meeting on Saturday. Is that the communication?
And that we will request some follow-up information.
And we'll request some follow-up information? Everybody comfortable with that?